Chapter 637. He's already paid the auction house. The purple-black-haired young man, Bevis, suddenly stood up from his seat, his eyes filled with astonishment as he looked at the subordinate he'd sent to scout for information. According to his estimation, the Bowden family would never be able to take out so many magic coins and would definitely offend the auction house. According to the rules of the auction house, he would only need to be the last bidder to get the blood essence of the ghost fox. But now, the result was the complete opposite of what he'd guessed. The other party had actually paid the magic coins and successfully completed the transaction, becoming the owner of the blood essence of the ghost fox. That guy isn't from the Bowden family. Bevis' face couldn't help but become gloomy. The other party was definitely not from the Bowden family. The declining Bowden family couldn't possibly have such great wealth. The blood essence of the ghost fox had to be obtained because it was related to a plan of the family. There couldn't be any mistakes. If he lost it, even he would be severely punished. Thinking of this, he looked at the subordinate who'd scouted for information and asked, "Where's the location? Have you found out where that guy lives?" "I've already found out. He lives in a hotel a street away from the auction house." After the auction ended, he returned to the hotel. The subordinate who'd scouted for information naturally knew his master's character. So after learning that the blood essence of the ghost fox had fallen into Gray's hands, he'd already sent someone to find out where Gray lived. "Lead the way." Bevis walked out with a cold face, and the subordinate he'd sent to scout for information hurriedly led the way. After attending the auction and completing the handover backstage, Gray returned to the hotel. The blood essence of the ghost fox was already in his hands, but his current level was a little low, and it wasn't enough for him to take another blood beast's blood to transform. But he should be able to do so in a few days. In addition to the blood essence of the ghost fox, he'd also bought a blood dragon potion. After taking it, his strength would greatly increase. He believed that his strength would soon be enough to take another blood beast's blood. Bang, bang, bang. It was already quite late at night, and Gray was about to turn off the lights and go to bed. Just then, there was a knock on the door of his room. "You are?" Gray opened the door, but to his surprise, it wasn't the hotel staff that appeared outside the door. Instead, it was a young man with purplish-black hair and a man who seemed to be an attendant. "Hello, sir. I'm Bevis Raleigh. Please forgive me for disturbing you," Bevis Raleigh said with a noble's bow. The composition of the forces in the source world was very mixed. Some existed in the form of organizations without any blood ties, while others existed in the form of clans with blood ties as the core. Some of these families established countries and became the rulers of these countries. Aristocratic etiquette was born because of this. However, due to the complexity of these forces, the aristocratic etiquette had already been extended. Some families or organizations with deep backgrounds would treat the aristocratic etiquette as a form of etiquette. "Why are you looking for me?" Gray returned a noble salute and asked. Bevis announced his name in order to let Gray know which family he came from. His family was very famous in this area. As long as the other party knew his family, the following transaction should be easy. Unfortunately, Gray had just arrived in Manuel City and didn't even know much about the families in Manuel City, let alone those outside. Therefore, the other party's method of revealing his name was destined to be useless. "Sir, you're not from the nearby area?" From Gray's reaction, Bevis immediately judged that Gray was not from the nearby area. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him not to have any reaction to his surname. "So what if I am?" Gray was a little impatient. It was getting late, and he was about to go to bed. The other party had come to his door inexplicably and talked in circles. He had no intention of chatting with such a stranger in the middle of the night. Most importantly, the other party was a man. "Then I'll be straightforward." Feeling the impatience in Gray's words, Bevis couldn't help but feel a little angry. However, as a child of a large family, he naturally knew how to hide his emotions. He maintained his composure and said, "I hope that sir can sell me the spectral fox blood essence you bought." The spectral fox blood essence? Gray suddenly realized that the other party had come for the magic ghost fox's blood essence. There was some surprise, but it was also reasonable. The only thing he had done in this city was to participate in the auction. for someone to come to his door, it could only be related to the auction. Sorry, the spectral fox blood essence is useful to me. I don't intend to sell it. Gray shook his head and refused directly. With the importance of a spectral fox blood essence to him, he couldn't sell it no matter what. 3 million magic coins. I'm willing to buy it from you for 3 million magic coins. Bevis held up 3 fingers. It wasn't that he didn't think of robbing, but since the other party could take out more than 2 million magic coins to buy the spectral fox blood essence, the other party must have a large force behind him. Rashly becoming enemies with such a force was obviously not in line with the family's interests, so he chose to pay a higher price to buy it. It's not a matter of money. The spectral fox blood essence is useful to me. I don't intend to sell it. Gray shook his head again. For the spectral fox blood essence, he wouldn't hesitate to spend all his savings to buy it. Why would he sell it to someone for a mere 3 million magic coins? Well, then I'll have to bother you. Bevis still maintained his composure. He bowed slightly to Gray and left with his servant. After turning around, the composure on his face disappeared, and the look in his eyes turned cold. The spectral fox blood essence was of great use to the family, and he had to get it no matter what. Since normal means didn't work, he could only use some extreme means. The other party had a large force behind him, but his family wasn't weak either. As long as he did it secretly enough, the force behind the other party wouldn't be able to find out that it was his family that did it. I'm afraid this matter won't end so easily. Looking at the master and servant leaving, Gray sighed in his heart. He didn't expect such a thing to happen at an auction. The purple-black-haired young man, Bevis, might have appeared to be very elegant, but he was determined to get the spectral fox blood essence. Now that his purchase had failed, the other party wouldn't give up so easily. Gray closed the door and waved his hand to release Marna. He placed him in the room to guard, and only then did he sleep peacefully. Although there were many powerful forces in the source world, not all of them could step on him. It was fine if they didn't do anything to him, but if they did, it was hard to say who would be the one to suffer. The next day, after checking out, Gray left Huntsman City and returned to Wellman City. Not long after he left Huntsman City, several people quietly left Huntsman City in the direction he left. After flying a few dozen miles away from Huntsman City, Gray flew over a small forest. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, hundreds of huge shadow tentacles shot out from the forest. Each of them was extremely thick and even harder than normal magic weapons. They intertwined to form a huge net, blocking Gray's path, and attacked Gray, who was flying in the air. They're still here. Gray snorted coldly. His greenish-black wings flapped, and suddenly, a large number of greenish-black wind blades appeared, attacking the shadow tentacles one after another. Pooh! 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 All the shadow tentacles attacking Gray were cut off. Not a single shadow tentacle could get within a few dozen meters of Gray, as if this area was a forbidden zone. Come out! Floating in the air, Gray coldly looked down at the forest and said coldly. His guess was right. The other party did not plan to give up so easily. Since they could not buy him, they decided to rob him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A total of 5 figures shot out from the forest and quickly surrounded Gray. They held different weapons in their hands. There were knives, swords, axes, daggers, and claws. They were all different. The only similarity was that they were all masked. Even their hair was covered, and only their eyes were exposed. Those eyes were filled with murderous intent. If you can't buy me, then you rob me. Is this how the Raleigh family does things? Gray looked at the 5 with a mocking gaze. They really think highly of me. They sent 5 kings to deal with me. I don't know what you're talking about. We're not from the Raleigh family. One of the masked men rushed over with a blade. Dark green light surrounded the blade. That was the light of poison. Before he even got close, there was a fishy smell. The air was already invaded by poison. You're in such a hurry to die. Gray looked coldly at the approaching masked man. He extended his right index finger, and a black fog appeared. Whoosh! The black fog was not big. It was only big enough to wrap around one person. It was as if a gust of wind could blow it away. However, the masked man with the blade felt a chill down his spine. He dodged to the side in fear. However, The speed of the black mist was unusually fast, and before he could evade it, it had already reached him. He gritted his teeth and slashed at the black fog. However, the moment the blade touched the black fog, the dark green light around it dissipated. His entire body was wrapped in the black fog. He only had time to let out a scream before he disappeared under the black fog, leaving behind only a saber that fell to the ground. There was no blood, no flesh, and no bones left. Everything disappeared. To be more precise, it was crushed. His flesh was crushed into invisible particles. After reaching the third metamorphosis, Gray's combat power immediately soared to the magic light level. Moreover, it was not an ordinary magic light. With this level of strength, it was easy to kill a king. Chapter 638. Magic Light, you are... Magic Light? One of his companions was killed in an instant. Not even his body was left behind. The remaining 4 people who were charging at Gray were terrified under their masks. They quickly retreated as if they were avoiding a snake or a scorpion. Many families had their own dark side. There were very few families that were truly the same on the surface. The Raleigh family was one such family. While they maintained a relatively positive image to the outside world, they secretly trained a group of people who specialized in doing dirty work. They were people who specialized in doing dirty work. After receiving orders from the family, the 5 of them rushed to Hensman City overnight. The Raleigh family's intelligence network had already analyzed Gray's level of power during this time. Although Gray did not make a move in Hensman City, many people had seen him fly in. From the speed of his flight, they could roughly estimate Gray's power. After determining that Gray had the strength of a king tier, and after making sure that the 5 of them were absolutely safe, the 5 of them quietly followed Gray, who had left Hensman City. Using their familiarity with the terrain, they took a detour to the front to ambush him. However, what they did not expect was that their intelligence was completely wrong. Their opponent was not a king, but a magic light. Split up and run. The 4 of them were covered in cold sweat. The mistake in their intelligence had put them in a very disadvantageous situation. They originally thought that their opponent was a king, but they did not expect it to be a terrifyingly powerful magic light. One of them had been killed as soon as they started fighting. Knowing that they were no match for Lin Huang, and that they might even die here, the 4 of them immediately decided to run in different directions. They hoped that this would give them a chance to escape. Although the person chosen as the target would definitely die, the others might have a chance to live. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? The corners of Gray's mouth curled up slightly. With a wave of his hand, a black fog suddenly attacked a masked man holding a dagger. Although the masked man with the dagger had his back to Gray, he still felt the danger coming from behind him. Boom! Knowing that he had been chosen as a target by Gray, despair rose in his heart. However, he still tried his best to struggle. His feet suddenly stepped to the side, and his body quickly moved to the side. However, just like the masked man who died at the hands of Gray, the masked man had no time to dodge the black mist that was as powerful as magic light. Puff! His clothes, his flesh, his bones, and even his rune space bag were all shattered. His body was dismembered in the air and dissipated with the wind. Only a dagger was left, and it quickly fell to the ground. After all, it was a silver-gray magic weapon. It was extremely hard and was not damaged by the black mist. After killing the masked man with the dagger, Gray turned his head and looked in another direction. In that direction, a masked man with a sword was already about 100 meters away from him. Whoosh! Purple light covered his whole body. The power of the law of time worked around him. Gray's speed was increased several times. In an instant, he appeared behind the masked man and slashed his sword at him. The masked man with the sword turned around in horror to block Gray's attack. However, before he could raise his sword, Gray's sword had already cut his left shoulder. Puff! A wound extended diagonally from his left shoulder to his waist. His body was cut in 2 and fell to the ground. Black mist spread out from the wound and wrapped around the 2 halves of the body. Just like the other 2, his body also dissipated like a gust of wind, leaving only his sword to fall to the ground. After doing all this, Gray looked in another direction. In that direction, A slender masked man with claws on his hands had already fled hundreds of meters away. As he ran, he was extremely nervous and terrified. He could not help but look behind him to confirm the situation. He saw that hundreds of meters away, one of his companions had been cut in half without being able to resist. The person who had killed him was looking in his direction. Although they were hundreds of meters apart, with the eyesight of a king, he could see clearly that the other person had a mocking smile on his face. His face turned pale as he stomped on the air with all his strength. His slanted body shot forward like an arrow, and his speed was even faster than before. There was great fear between life and death. In the face of death, he had broken his own limit and increased his speed. If he could escape this time, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Under the pressure of life and death, one's strength could grow. This was not something that only geniuses could do. Ordinary people could do it too. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Although he was hundreds of meters behind, Gray caught up with him in a few moments under the purple light and appeared behind him. "No, don't kill me." The masked man with claws on his hands screamed in despair. It was a woman's voice. She was a female king-class elite. "Pooh!" Gray's face was cold. His sword, which was wrapped in black fog, slashed across the female king's waist. Just like the masked man who had held the sword, she was cut in half. Her body was invaded by the black fog and dissipated like smoke, leaving behind only the sturdy magic weapon. After killing this female king, Gray looked in another direction. In that direction, the axe-wielding king was no longer in sight. Damn it, the people in charge of intelligence are all idiots. Is this the power of a king? Why don't they find a rock and kill themselves? The axe-wielding king was hiding in the shadow of a giant tree. His body was motionless, and his body was completely blended into the shadow of the tree. His ability was shadow type, and he could blend into the shadows. He was now using his shadow ability to blend into the shadow of the tree, hoping to avoid being killed this way. In his heart, he was already cursing the person in charge of intelligence. He wanted nothing more than to take his axe and split the person's head open. The mistake in their intelligence had caused them to seriously underestimate the opponent's power. Although he hadn't seen the situation of the others, he guessed that they were most likely dead. He could only hope that his shadow ability could fool the opponent and allow him to escape with his life. Whoosh! There was a whistling sound in the air. He knew that the opponent was chasing him. He didn't look up, afraid that the opponent would sense his gaze. The stronger a person was, the more sensitive their five senses were. It wasn't impossible for the opponent to sense his presence through his gaze. I dodged it. The whistling sound was getting farther and farther away. He relaxed. It seemed that he had dodged it. He hurriedly maintained his shadow ability and used the shadows between the trees to escape in a different direction. This place wasn't safe. If the opponent couldn't find him, they would turn back and use their ability to flatten the surrounding area. He would be exposed. He had to use this time to hide further away. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a whistling sound coming from afar. He was shocked and quickly hid in the shadow of a tree. Not long after he hid in the shadow of the tree, the opponent turned back. Not only did he turn back, but he also fell from the sky and landed in the forest. The opponent landed in the forest and carefully searched the ground. He should be looking for something like a trace. The opponent should know some tracking methods. It's useless. Seeing the opponent like this, he was slightly relieved. He had a better chance of escaping. If the opponent knew some tracking methods, then he was proficient in them. Although the situation was very dangerous, he still used these tracking methods subconsciously to erase his own traces. It was impossible for the opponent to use his traces to track him. Pa pa pa. The opponent was searching aimlessly in the forest. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. He slowed down his breathing and even slowed his heartbeat. He was able to do this because he had undergone professional training. Pa pa pa. The opponent walked past him dozens of meters away and was about to pass him. At this moment, the opponent's footsteps suddenly stopped. The sudden change almost made his heartbeat go out of control. It almost burst out like a drum. Fortunately, his psychological quality was strong, and he forcibly suppressed it. He believed that he didn't leave any traces. The opponent couldn't have found him. This must be just a coincidence. Pa pa pa. The opponent's footsteps were getting closer. His back was soaked in cold sweat. He still maintained his motionless posture, as if he was really just a shadow. He didn't dare to raise his head to look at the opponent, because he was afraid that the opponent would notice his gaze. He could only keep his head down and judge the distance from the opponent from the sound. "What? You don't dare to look at me with your head down." Suddenly, a young voice with a hint of mockery said. He was startled and reflexively stepped back. He looked at the opponent in horror. "How did you know I was hiding here?" "Of course, I saw with my eyes." With a flash, Gray blocked the opponent's path and said with a sneer. His infrared perception from the shadow snake allowed him to distinguish between living creatures and other things through the difference in temperature. Although the opponent blended perfectly into the shadows and was no different from a real shadow, it was a pity that he could see clearly with his infrared perception. There was nowhere to hide. "You have an infrared perception ability." The masked man with the battle axe immediately understood how Gray had discovered him. Despair rose in his heart. He knew that he was going to die today. He roared and quickly swung his axe. Gray looked on coldly. The opponent was just struggling on the verge of death. How could a king be a match for him? Even in magic light, very few people were a match for him. Pooh! The blade of the axe cut through the blood vessels in his throat. Blood spurted out. The masked man's weapon was a battle axe. He hacked down aggressively, aiming for his own neck instead of Gray. This unexpected scene happened before Gray could even stop it. The opponent wasn't struggling on the verge of death. He knew that he was going to die and chose to end his own life. Chapter 639. Asterisk clatter. Asterisk the battle axe in his hand fell to the ground. The masked man's eyes rolled back as he fell to the ground. Blood kept flowing from his throat, dyeing the ground red. He actually committed suicide. Gray's face flashed with astonishment. He had thought that the masked man would risk his life to attack him, and he had also thought that the masked man would feign an attack to escape, but he had never thought that the masked man would commit suicide. Suicide was easier said than done. The desire to live was the most basic instinct of life. Even if one knew that they were going to die, they would still try their best to struggle. There were very few people who would choose to end their own lives. To a certain extent, such people were ruthless. They were ruthless to themselves, and even more ruthless to others. The masked man with the battle axe was indeed such a ruthless person. He had always done dirty work for the Raleigh family, and he had tortured people many times in order to obtain information. He knew the pain of torture too well, so when he knew that he was going to die, he chose the easiest way to die. This was not cowardice, but a courageous decision to a certain extent. Gray didn't want to obtain information about the Raleigh family through the masked man, so torture was necessary. "Forget it. I'll go back to Manuel City and ask around." The number of resurrection abilities he could control had reached its limit, and he could not use them. Gray shook his head helplessly. After plundering the masked man's ruined space, he turned around and continued to rush to Manuel City. He had not planned to return to Hindman City. Since they had attacked him, the Raleigh family must have been prepared for failure. The purple-haired young man he met last night, Bevis Raleigh, might have already left Hindman City. Even if he did not leave Hindman City, looking for a person in a huge city with a population of more than 1 million without any help was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. Unless he was willing to destroy the entire city to force the other party out. However, such a thing would not only create a life and death feud with the forces that control the city, but he also could not do such a thing. He could not make millions of lives pay for the other party's sake. Besides, the person could run, but the family could not. Judging from the other party's tone, the other party's family should be very famous in the nearby area. When the time came, he would only need to ask around to find out. A few hours later, more than 20 figures appeared near where Gray and the 5 people were fighting. They were members of the Raleigh family, and Bevis was among them. However, this time, the one in charge was no longer him, but an old man with a gray beard. Bevis immediately guessed that something must have happened when the men he sent to kill the other party did not return after an hour. So he requested backup from his family. The gray-bearded old man was a magic light warrior sent by his family to preside over the matter. He actually failed. Could it be that he has an expert protecting him? But according to the information we received, he should be alone. Bevis's expression was gloomy, and his mood was terrible. The failure to purchase the blood essence of the magic ghost fox from the Bowden family had already affected his reputation within the family. Now that he had failed to seize the blood essence of the magic ghost fox, even though he had yet to return to the family, he could already imagine how his reputation within the family would be affected. There's something here. There was a cry from the distant trees of the searchers. Bevis and the gray-bearded old man hurried over and saw the discovery the old man had mentioned. A saber was inserted vertically into the ground, with the hilt submerged. Only the hilt remained outside. It was a purple hilt with a decorative and anti-slip animal pattern on the hilt. Among the searchers, a man of medium build pulled out the saber with a grave expression and held it in his hands. This is Tovy's weapon. He was someone who handled the dirty work for the Raleigh family. Naturally, he had seen Tovy, who also handled the dirty work and had even carried out missions together. He recognized the saber at a glance. Search the surroundings with this place as the center. The gray-bearded old man ordered with a gloomy expression. Judging from the saber, the 5 people were most likely dead. Losing 5 king-level warriors at once was a great loss, even for a family like the Raleigh family. Yes, Elder. The others responded in unison before splitting up to take action. Not long after, another 3 weapons were found. After identification, it was confirmed that they belonged to the other 3 of the 5 people. Elder, Kelly's body has been found. They continued to search. Half an hour later, a pale-faced man rushed over to report. Everyone hurried over. When they saw the corpse of the man called Kelly, everyone's complexion could not help but become slightly pale like the man from before. They were extremely shocked. Only the gray-bearded old man's complexion did not change. However, his face could not help but twitch slightly. A masked man had fallen to the ground in a very strange posture. With him, as the center, there was a pool of dry blood around him. They determined the cause of death, and this was what shocked them. The man had died of suicide. That's right, it was not a homicide, but a suicide. The man had obviously died under his own battle axe, and he had smeared it on himself. To be forced to commit suicide, one could only imagine the desperate situation he had been in before he died. One could only imagine what kind of enemy he had encountered. He definitely had an expert protecting him. Bevis's back was drenched in cold sweat, and his heart was pounding. Last night, when he had gone to buy the spectral fox from the other party, that expert must have been nearby. Fortunately, he had considered the consequences and had not used force. Otherwise, he would have been among the dead. Oomph, look at what you've done. If you hadn't lowered the price so low, the Bowden family would not have sold the spectral fox to the auction house, and this would not have happened. The gray-bearded old man glared at Bevis, his eyes filled with dissatisfaction. Didn't I just want to help the family save some money? Bevis was submissive, his heart full of regret. He had deliberately lowered the price to buy the spectral fox's blood at a low price in order to show off his talent and gain the family's attention. He had not expected to overreach himself and let things turn out like this. Elder, what do we do now? Find someone to draw his face and search for him in the surrounding cities. The Raleigh family has not suffered such a big loss in a long time. The gray-bearded old man snorted coldly, his eyes filled with a cold light. Although the Raleigh family was at fault in this matter, the other party had gone too far by killing them. Moreover, the spectral fox's blood was indeed a must. They had to get their hands on it. After returning to Manuel City, Gray returned to his residence. After ordering the servants not to disturb him and locking himself in the training room, and releasing Marina to guard his safety, Gray took out the blood dragon potion. In the blue translucent crystal bottle, the blood-colored liquid was as bright as magma. It was very gorgeous. The bottle and the bright red liquid inside were perfectly combined, and the whole thing looked like an exquisite work of art. Unscrewing the cork, Gray drank it in one gulp. The scorching heat spread from his stomach to the rest of his body. Soon, the scorching heat had spread all over his body. Under this scorching heat, the blood vessels all over his body expanded, one by one clearly visible. His whole body was bright red, as if what he had drunk was not a potion, but real magma. At this time, what was flowing all over his body was no longer blood, but scarlet magma with scorching heat. The magma washed over his body again and again, triggering a huge change in his body. The originally extremely strong muscle tissue became even stronger and denser under this kind of washing. The originally extremely hard bones also became even harder under this kind of power. It was as if they were being hammered on fire. The impurities disappeared, and the jade-like texture became even rounder. After more than half an hour, the strengthening of his body was completely completed. Gray, who was sweating profusely, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. The improvement is not small, but compared to the first time I took it, it's a lot worse. The first time he took the Blood Dragon potion, Gray's realm had risen from the early 3rd level of the Desolate level to the King level. This time, after taking the Blood Dragon potion, he felt that the improvement should be close to half a level. The difference between the 2 times he took it was obvious, but it was not difficult to understand. The first time he took it, he was at the Desolate level, but the second time he was at the King level. The further he cultivated, the slower the improvement. As he was at the King level, he needed more accumulation for every level compared to the Desolate level. It was because of this that the Desolate level was enough to raise one's realm, but the King level could only raise one's realm by half a level. Even with my special constitution, I can only raise my realm by less than half a level. If it were anyone else, the improvement would be even smaller. Gray shook his head slightly. Looks like I have to cultivate in peace for a few days and raise my strength enough to take the blood of a blood fiend again. Originally, Gray had planned to take revenge on the Raleigh family as soon as he found out about them, but now it seemed that he would have to postpone it. Compared to taking revenge on the Raleigh family, increasing his strength and taking the blood of the spectral fox to transform was a more important option. The Byland family study. Take a look at this. Edmund handed a portrait to Kinza. Kinza took it doubtfully, but the next moment, she could not help but be shocked. Father, where did this portrait come from? The person in the portrait should be Sir Gray. This is the enemy the Raleigh family is searching for, Edmund said with a serious expression. The enemy the Raleigh family is searching for? Sir Gray has just arrived in Manuel City. How did he become enemies with the Raleigh family? Kinza was stunned. I don't know the exact reason, and we don't need to know, but it is certain that Gray and the Raleigh family are enemies. Unknowingly, Edmund had changed the way he addressed Gray from Sir Gray to Gray. He raised his head, his eyes cold. This is an opportunity to make friends with the Raleigh family. Chapter 640. But Father, Gray Fergus also has a powerful force behind him. This force is not necessarily weaker than the Raleigh family. Kinza did not blame her father for biting the hand that fed her. At this moment, her beautiful face was cold and emotionless. She did not consider the gains and losses in the slightest bit of guilt. Her family was a merchant family, and the motto of merchants was profit above all. For 50% of the profit, they could take risks. For 100% of the profit, they could trample on the law. For 300% of the profit, they dared to commit any crime. This was a merchant. As long as there was profit to be made, anything could be traded. She had been influenced by this kind of thinking since she was young. She did not have the concept of biting the hand that fed her. But this force is too far away from us. It is of limited help to us. Edmund's eyes were cold as he calculated the difference between betraying Gray and not betraying Gray. He shook his head. Compared to Gray's force that was far away, it was obviously more in line with the interests of the Byland family to be on good terms with the Raleigh family, which was nearby. It was more beneficial to the Byland family. The Raleigh family is indeed more in line with the interests of the Byland family. Kinza judged that snitching on the secret was more in line with the interests of the Byland family. However, she was also a little worried in her heart. She looked at Edmund and said, "But if we do that, we are bound to become enemies with the force behind Gray. So we must do it secretly enough. We must not let anyone know that we are the ones who snitched on the secret," Edmund said in a terrifyingly calm tone. I will leave this matter to you. You must do it secretly enough. Not long after, a message quietly came out from the Byland family and secretly passed to the Raleigh family. The Raleigh family who received the news immediately took action. A group of masters quickly rushed to Manuel City. Afternoon, Gray sat in the pavilion in the small garden while drinking iced milk tea and taking a rest. A sense of satisfaction arose in his heart. Pa, pa, pa. The sound of footsteps approached. Gray looked up and saw a maid coming. He knew that the maid must have something to disturb him. He asked, "What is it?" "Lord Gray, someone is here to visit," the maid said after bowing slightly. "Invite him to the pavilion." Gray was a little confused about who the visitor was. He thought about it and gave the order. Not long after, a person wearing a cloak walked over. The person's figure was shrouded in a large cloak. One could only tell from her slightly perky chest and beautiful chin that she was a woman. The servant retreated, and the woman took off the hat on her head. This was a beautiful and elegant woman. Her long black hair was tied up behind her head with a hairband, and a necklace of black gems on her chest made her temperament even more prominent. Her figure was not magnificent, only slightly rising and falling. However, it was extremely compatible with her temperament. If it was too magnificent, it would instead destroy the beauty of her temperament. "It's you." Gray was slightly surprised by the visitor. He gestured for her to sit down and poured her a cup of iced milk tea. The person who came was a woman named Charlotte Colum, whom Gray had met in the blood shop. "Iced milk tea? His Excellency Gray sure is comfortable." Charlotte Colum took a sip of milk tea, and the cold, mellow fragrance filled her mouth. Her tone was slightly teasing. "I just don't know if you can still be so comfortable after hearing my next news." "News? What news?" Gray looked at Charlotte Colum with a puzzled look. Charlotte Colum looked around and confirmed that there was no one nearby before speaking. "His Excellency Gray probably doesn't know yet. The Raleigh family is now looking for you everywhere." "The Raleigh family is looking for me." A look of surprise appeared on Gray's face. Because he had consumed the spectral fox's blood and transformed, he didn't have time to look for the Raleigh family. He didn't expect the Raleigh family to look for him instead. What was domineering? This was domineering. They failed to rob him and were killed instead. It was fine if they didn't know how to restrain themselves, but now they were blatantly searching for him, wanting to take revenge. Although not many people in Manuel City have seen you, you'd better leave Manuel City as soon as possible and contact your family. Also, be careful of the Byland family. Charlotte Colum reminded with a solemn expression. "Be careful of the Byland family?" Gray raised a brow and looked at Charlotte Colum, waiting for her explanation. He would never think too highly of others, but neither would he think too badly of others. Since Charlotte Colum said so, she might have some confidence that the Byland family would harm him. "Do you know how my Colum family and the Byland family became enemies?" Without waiting for Gray's reply, Charlotte Colum continued with a mocking sneer on her face. "As a matter of fact, a few years ago, my Colum family and the Byland family had a good relationship. The reason why we turned against each other was because during an important business deal, the Byland family wanted to monopolize all the benefits, so they plotted against my Colum family, causing us to suffer heavy losses. So be careful of the Byland family. They are definitely not some kind family. Don't expect them to treat you like how they treated the Colum family because of your kindness. It's up to you to believe it or not. They'll take my leave." With that said, Charlotte Colum put on her hood again, stood up, and left. What an unexpected piece of news. Looking at the departing figure, a mocking smile appeared on Gray's face. He wasn't the kind of person who would believe whatever others said, but he had a faint feeling that what Charlotte Colum said might be true. Her words and actions didn't seem to be fake. Of course, it didn't exclude the possibility that she was naturally good at acting and could tell lies with sincerity. However, there was one thing that made Gray suspicious of the Byland family. The Byland family didn't tell him that the Rawle family was searching for him. If the Byland family had the intention, the one who told him this now wouldn't be Charlotte Colum, but someone from the Byland family. Then let's see what the Byland family will do. Gray curled up the corner of his lips, but his eyes revealed a cold glint. The reason why he saved the Bylan family's father and daughter in the Forbidden Forest wasn't because of his sudden kindness, but because he needed someone to lead the way. Regardless of the reason, it was a fact that he saved the Bylan family's lives. If the Bylan family really dared to repay his kindness with ingratitude, he would let them know what despair was. I hope I didn't make a wrong bet. Charlotte Colum looked at the residence behind her and tightened the hood on her head before leaving quickly. The reason why she came here was naturally not out of kindness. In terms of friendship, she didn't have any friendship with Gray. The reason why she came here was because of a bet. After knowing that the Rawl family was searching for Gray, she had two choices. She could either tell the Rawl family and gain their friendship, or she could tell the news to Gray and gain the friendship of Gray and the faction behind Gray. Between the two, she chose the latter. It wasn't only because she could gain the friendship of Gray and the faction behind Gray, but it was also because she could consign the Bylan family to eternal damnation. Ever since the Bylan family plotted against them a few years ago, the Colum family had been closely monitoring the Bylan family's movements, looking for an opportunity to strike back. Although the Bylan family had been extremely secretive in leaking information to the Rawl family, it was easy to deduce what the other party was doing after combining it with the information they had obtained. Guessing that the Bylan family had leaked information to the Rawl family, her family immediately thought of a way to destroy the Bylan family. That was to rely on Gray and the faction behind Gray. Of course, this was a complete gamble. Even if they were prepared, Gray might not be able to escape the Rawl family's pursuit and wait for the family's reinforcements to arrive. However, this gamble was completely worth it. After all, even if they failed, her family wouldn't lose anything. In the evening, the sunset glow dyed the sky red, as if it had been soaked in endless blood. Under the sunset, the Rawl family's experts entered the city and headed straight for Gray's residence. After arriving at Gray's residence, they spread out and surrounded Gray's residence. Then, they nimbly flipped over the wall and landed soundlessly, like cheetahs hunting for their prey. They quickly searched Gray's residence and searched every inch of it. Finally, they gathered at the pavilion in the small garden and heavily surrounded it. In the pavilion, Gray sat at the stone table. Beside him, Marinus stood like a javelin, motionless. You really do have experts protecting you. Among the people surrounding Gray, Bevis Raleigh was one of them. He had strongly requested to come here to atone for his crimes and render meritorious service. Seeing Gray standing alone beside him, his face was slightly ferocious. The people he sent to kill Gray had failed, and they had even lost 5 King Stage experts. This had greatly affected his status in the family. Some of the disciples who had always greeted him with a smile now looked at him with contempt. And all of this was caused by Gray. Only by killing Gray with his own hands could he vent the hatred in his heart. Surrounded by so many people, Gray's expression did not change much. The servants in the residence had been quietly sent away by him using spatial teleportation. Now, he was the only one in the residence. Standing up, he swept his gaze across the group of people surrounding him and said with a cold look in his eyes, "I thought you would come earlier. I didn't expect you to come only now. Compared to the Bylan family, you're a little less efficient. It took you so long to inform you. You made me wait for so long. Oh no, we've been tricked by the Bylan family. He's in cahoots with them. There may be enemies lying in ambush. Be careful." Hearing Gray's words, the group of people surrounding Gray immediately became alert. Various blood beasts were attached to their weapons. They looked around, looking for people who might be hiding in the dark. Those with earth elemental abilities stomped on the ground. Spikes pierced into the ground from the surface, attacking enemies who might be hiding underground. Under the bombardment of abilities, the residence that Gray had spent more than 10,000 magic coins to buy was completely turned into ruins. Chapter 641. It really is the Bylan family. Seeing the reaction of the Raleigh family, Gray could not help but feel a chill in his heart, even though he had already guessed it. The Bylan family had indeed betrayed him. They did not hesitate to betray their savior. This Bylan family was really something. It could be said that they no longer had any bottom line to speak of. Extreme killing intent lingered in Gray's heart. At this moment, the family he wanted to destroy the most was not the Raleigh family, but the Byland family. If this is the Colum family's goal, then your goal can be considered as achieved. After Charlotte Colum left, Gray naturally considered the reason why she did this. It was definitely impossible for them to be friends. There was no friendship between him and Charlotte Colum. After all, they had only met twice, including this time. It was also impossible to find a backer for the forces behind him. If they really wanted to find a backer, it would be more cost-effective to inform the Raleigh family of his information. The only reason he could think of was to use him to destroy the Byland family. Don't worry, I'm the only one here. Looking at the Raleigh family's experts who had fallen into a state of alert, Gray's face was very cold. His voice carried an emphasis on the word alone. As for whether the other party understood the meaning of his words, he did not care. It was the same whether the dead understood or not. Whoosh! Whoosh! The next moment, he and Marina's figures disappeared from the pavilion and rushed into the Raleigh family's experts from different directions. Pucci, a flower of blood bloomed. Flesh, blood, and bone fragments splattered, staining the ground and splashing on the people around. It was as bright as a plum blossom. Under the reflection of the sunset, it was even more bright red. This was a king-class warrior. However, under Marina's fist, his flesh and bones exploded and he died. He did not even have time to scream. When Marina was alive, he was a powerhouse at the last level of magic light. Although he only had the strength of his physical body now, his combat strength was far beyond the ordinary magic light. Such a punch was not something a king-class warrior could withstand. Therefore, the king-class warrior who took the punch directly exploded into meat paste. Puff! A king-class warrior was cut in half by Gray's sword. Before his body hit the ground, it was wrapped up by the black mist around the sword. It disappeared into thin air, turning into an invisible powder. Although Gray was only at the third tier of the king class, his various powerful abilities made him far more powerful than the average magic light. He also killed a king-class warrior with a single blow. Be careful, both of them are magic light. When Gray and Marina each went for a king, the Luo Lai family's magic light reacted and went for the two of them. There were 4 shadows that were as fast as magic light. These were the people the Luo Lai family had sent to kill Gray. Every one of them was at the magic light level, and 2 of them were not at the ordinary magic light level. The main reason they were sent was to deal with the magic light warriors, who were secretly protecting Gray. Of course, sending 4 magic light warriors was almost an all-out effort, even with the Luo Lai family's resources. We can't let them escape. The 4 of them were shocked. They felt that things were getting out of hand. Not only did the enemy know of their arrival, but they also had 2 magic light warriors. Even the young man was a magic light warrior. The most troublesome thing was that neither of them were at the ordinary level of magic light. If they were not careful, the 2 of them could escape. And if they did, what awaited the Luo Lai family would be the revenge of the enemy. Whoosh! Whoosh! Gray and Marina avoided the 2 magic light warriors who were surrounding them. When they reappeared, they each appeared beside a king-class warrior of the Luo Lai family. Before dealing with the 4 magic light warriors, Gray decided to kill some of those who were not at the magic light level. He didn't want these people to swarm away after seeing the magic light warriors being killed and not be able to stop them in time. The person Gray approached was cut in half and dissipated in the wind, surrounded by a black mist. Boom! The man who was approached by Marina had his flesh and bones splattered everywhere, turning into minced meat. Whoosh! The 2 of them once again pounced on the others. Seeing Gray and Marina approach, the people who were close to them tried to dodge in fear, but they couldn't. They were once again turned into minced meat. Those who were not at the magic light level retreat. 6 people had already been killed by Gray and Marina. There were less than 10 people left, and the 4 of them couldn't move freely because of their own people. The gray-bearded elder ordered loudly. Hearing his orders, the others hurriedly retreated as if they had been pardoned. Before they knew it, cold sweat had already covered their foreheads. The strength displayed by the 2 of them shocked them. The 2 of them were terrifyingly strong. Their companions were instantly killed when they encountered them. Even the four masters of the magic light realm could not stop the two of them. Not only were the two of them magic light warriors, they were not ordinary magic light warriors. He is also a magic light warrior. Bevis was sweating profusely. His clothes were soaked in sweat. He kept retreating, looking at Gray in shock. Not only did the other party have the protection of a master of the magic light realm, but his own strength was also in the magic light realm. While he was frightened, he couldn't help but feel jealous. In his family, he was valued because of his outstanding talent. Even so, he was only at the king level, but the other party was already in the magic light realm. The difference in talent between the two was obvious. This made him jealous. He was jealous that such talent belonged to the other party and not him. Without the hindrance of others, the four masters of the magic light realm finally let loose and attacked Gray and Marina with all their strength. Whoosh! A large amount of dark green fog appeared, and with a terrifying corrosiveness that could corrode magic weapons, Gray was enveloped in it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless large shadow tentacles appeared around Gray, each stronger than the metal of a magic weapon. They turned into a sturdy cage, enveloping Gray and squeezing him inwards. Boom! A large stone hand suddenly reached out from the soil and slapped at Marina. Before it hit, the imprint of a large palm could be faintly seen on the ground. At the same time, a layer of hard ice suddenly appeared, spreading quickly from Marina's feet and freezing Marina in ice. Faced with the siege of the four masters of the magic light realm, Gray and Marina seemed to have been surrounded. But in the next moment, poof! A large gap appeared in the sealed shadow cage. From the gap, Gray's figure rushed out like a purple light, quickly rushing towards the magic light realm warrior who controlled the shadows. The poisonous gas ability of the magic light realm could not hurt him. Before it got close to him, he had already eliminated it with the power of time. Besides, even if he did not resist, with the strength of his body's alloy form, the poisonous gas would not hurt him. Not good. Seeing Gray rushing towards him, the magic light realm warrior who controlled the shadows hurriedly retreated. His instincts told him that if he let Gray get close to him, the situation would be very bad. However, he only took a few steps back, and a purple light swept over him, completely enveloping him in purple light. No, under the purple light, his appearance quickly aged. In just a few moments, he had aged like a piece of rotten wood, and his body collapsed to the ground powerlessly. Now that he had reached the third stage of the king stage, Gray's power of time was now even stronger. One attack from a master of the magic light realm was enough to deprive him of all his life. What ability is this? Another magic light realm warrior who had surrounded Gray, the one who had used the poisonous gas ability just now, looked at his extremely old and completely dead comrade with horror in his eyes. For masters of the magic light realm, like them who were used to seeing death, it was not scary to see someone die in front of them. However, such a strange death sent chills down their spines. Gray turned to look at his opponent and did not make any response. His body was enveloped in purple light, and he quickly rushed towards his opponent. On the other side, Marina was frozen in ice and was about to be hit by the giant stone hand. Kacha! Suddenly, a terrifying power exploded in Marina's body. The power of the fifth stage of the magic light realm broke free from the hard ice that had frozen him. He then suddenly punched out and met the giant stone hand that was about to hit him. Kaboom! The giant stone hand shattered, and Marina's body passed through it and appeared beside the magic light realm warrior who controlled the stone. This was a middle-aged female magic light realm warrior. It was not difficult to guess from the slightly loose skin on her body that she could maintain her middle-aged appearance was all due to her maintenance. Kacha! Before the female magic light realm warrior could react, his clawed right hand grabbed the female magic light realm warrior's neck and then squeezed down without hesitation. The sound of bones breaking rang out. The female magic light realm warrior's throat and neck were crushed. The look in her eyes became dull, and her body fell down powerlessly. Marina casually threw away the female magic light realm warrior. The female magic light realm warrior rolled on the ground a few times before coming to a stop. Her neck was unnaturally bent. Then he looked at the magic light realm warrior who had used the ice ability to attack him, and his figure rushed straight towards him. Kacha! Wrapped in purple light, the poison-type magic light realm warrior quickly aged. His withered body fell down powerlessly and completely lost all signs of life. Kacha! The clawed fist penetrated the chest of the magic light realm warrior, and the beating heart was immediately pierced. The magic light realm warrior coughed up blood, and his body slowly fell down. In a one-on-one situation, the remaining 2 magic light realm warriors were killed without exception. Kacha! Kacha! After killing the 4 magic light realm warriors, Gray and Maruna's killing didn't stop there. 1 man and 1 corpse quickly rushed towards the other members of the Raleigh family who had followed them this time. Kacha! 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 One by one, members of the Raleigh family were killed. Gray and Maruna mercilessly slaughtered the other members of the Raleigh family who had no ability to resist. "No, don't kill me," Bevis begged for mercy, his face pale and his body trembling violently from fear. Witnessing the deaths of the 4 magic light realm elders and being killed in a crushing manner, he was dominated by fear, and his heart was filled with despair. Kacha! Gray's eyes were cold as he crossed paths with Bevis. The moment they crossed paths, his long sword slashed the other's body. The other's body turned into 2 halves and disappeared under the black fog. Gray naturally didn't have any intention of showing mercy to those who came to kill him. In just a dozen breaths, the remaining members of the Raleigh family were all killed. Gray stopped and stood in the ruins. His eyes were filled with killing intent because he had just killed a lot of people, and he said coldly, "Come out." Chapter 642. Please don't misunderstand. We're not from the Raleigh family. More than a dozen figures appeared. There were old men, middle-aged men, men and women, and a thin man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s hurriedly said. The thin man's forehead was covered in sweat, and there was a trace of shock in the depths of his eyes. He was shocked by the outcome before him. "Who are you people?" Gray looked at the thin man and asked. "We're from the Manuel family. We heard the sounds of fighting, so we rushed over." Under Gray's gaze, the skinny man felt a great pressure. He didn't dare to hesitate and hurriedly said, "Manuel family, your speed is really abnormally slow." Gray snorted coldly upon hearing that the other party belonged to the Manuel family and looked meaningfully at the thin man. Fighting was naturally forbidden in the city, and fighting on the level of magic light was absolutely forbidden. Although there were giant runic matrices buried in the ground to weaken the power of the battle, they definitely couldn't withstand the devastation of magic light. Generally speaking, when something like this happened, the Manuel family would immediately rush over to stop the battle, but this time, the other party only arrived when the battle was about to end. Gray didn't believe that there was nothing fishy about this. The most likely possibility was that the other party had reached some sort of tacit understanding with the Raleigh family. The Raleigh family had promised the other party something, and the other party had tacitly allowed the Raleigh family to attack him in the city. Hearing the dissatisfaction in Gray's voice, the thin man's heart suddenly tightened, and large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Just as Gray had guessed, the Manuel family had indeed reached a tacit understanding with the Raleigh family in secret. The Raleigh family had given the mining rights of a mine as the Manuel family's loss, and the Manuel family would not interfere with the other party's actions in the city. This kind of exchange of benefits was already an unspoken rule between the various families when dealing with troublesome enemies. The Manuel family had done this before, so when the Raleigh family came to ask for help, the Manuel family agreed without much consideration. However, the Manuel family's only miscalculation was that the Raleigh family, who had come out in full force and were well prepared, had been defeated. All of them had been wiped out here, while the enemy had suffered almost no losses. This put the Manuel family in an extremely awkward situation. After all, the Manuel family's role in this matter was definitely not glorious. After this, I will make a trip to the Manuel family. Gray snorted coldly as he swept his gaze across the Manuel family members. He took everything from the 4 Magic Light family members and turned the corpses of the 2 Magic Light family members who were killed by the power of time into a bloody mess. This was to prevent the other forces from judging his ability from the corpses. He turned around and walked towards the direction of the Bylan family. Facing such a powerful Gray, many of the people from the Manuel clan revealed expressions of humiliation and anger. However, when they swept their gazes over the experts of the Luolai clan who had died here, their hearts turned cold and they didn't dare to make a sound. If he could wipe out the experts of the Luolai clan, then it wasn't impossible for him to wipe out the Manuel family. The Manuel family couldn't afford to provoke such a person. The upper echelons of the Colum family had gathered. What? The people sent by the Luolai clan have all been wiped out? The room fell silent upon hearing this explosive news. No one spoke for a long time. In order to avoid being misunderstood and treated as an enemy, the Colum family had only sent a few people to observe from afar. The other families in the city had also sent the same people. And just a moment ago, one of the people they had sent to observe had returned and told them a shocking piece of news. The people sent by the Luolai clan had all been wiped out, and Gray Fergus was completely unharmed. The news isn't wrong, right? After a long while, a composed, middle-aged man sitting at the patriarch's seat looked at the person who had reported the news and confirmed it once more. Although it was almost impossible to make a mistake in this matter, since the victor could be determined at a glance, he still couldn't help but confirm it with the person who had reported the news. Patriarch, I'm sure there's no mistake. The person who had reported the news said with certainty. Although he hadn't seen the details of the battle clearly due to the distance and the dust that had been stirred up by the battle, he had seen clearly who had survived in the end. It was indeed Gray Fergus without a doubt. Who exactly is he? He actually has such an expert protecting him. Even the Luolai clan suffered a great loss. Charlotte's heart was filled with astonishment, and all sorts of mixed emotions. In her opinion, when facing the attack of the Luolai clan's experts, even if she had warned the other party to be prepared, it was already good enough that he could protect himself. Yet, not only was the other party unscathed, but he even wiped out the Luolai clan's experts. Although she didn't know how many experts the Luolai clan had sent this time, she was certain that there were definitely magic light experts among them. To be able to wipe out the Luolai clan's experts under such circumstances, the strength of the person protecting the other party was definitely not as simple as an ordinary magic light expert. No matter who he is, the Bylan clan is finished. Your brother's death has finally been avenged. The middle-aged man sitting on the main seat had an excited expression on his face. The others in the room were also filled with excitement. They had been waiting for this day for a long time. Brother's death has finally been avenged. Hearing this, Charlotte's fair hands clenched tightly. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. A few years ago, under the Bylan clan's dark hands, not only had her clan suffered heavy losses, but her brother had also died. Since that day, she had vowed to destroy the Bylan clan to avenge her brother. After learning that the Bylan clan had repaid Gray Fergus's kindness with enmity, she knew that her chance had come. She had resolutely chosen to bet on Gray Fergus. And the result wasn't just as she had hoped, it was also beyond her expectations. Not only had Gray Fergus blocked the Luolai clan's attack, but he had also wiped out the Luolai clan's experts. The Bylan clan, who had betrayed him, had already met their end. Bylan clan. What? The Luolai clan's experts have all been wiped out? The same exclamation appeared in the Bylan clan and the Colum clan, but the meaning behind it was completely different. The Colum clan was pleasantly surprised, while the Bylan clan was terrified. Some of them were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. They had betrayed Gray and secretly told the Luolai clan about Gray. Although all of this was done very secretly, they couldn't help but worry that the other party might have discovered it. After all, the Luolai clan was aware of it. Could it be that he had already interrogated the Luolai clan? Master, Sir Gray is here. At this moment, a servant knocked on the door and reported from outside. Asterisk thud. Asterisk in a room, some people didn't sit properly and fell to the ground. Some people dropped their teacups and shattered them. Some people stood up in a panic, as if their buttocks were on fire. Why is he here? Kesha's voice trembled slightly as she looked at her father. She had a very bad premonition. As for her father, he was still calm as he sat on the master's seat. However, his trembling legs under the table showed that he was panicking at this moment. Asterisk bang. Asterisk the door was violently pushed open by Gray. Gray walked into the room and swept his gaze across the upper echelons of the Bylan clan. His gaze was as piercing as needles. Sir Gray, you're here. It's great that you're fine. We were worried when we heard that you were ambushed. It's a pity that you know that with our strength, we can't help at all. Edmund stood up with a warm smile on his face. However, the flesh on his face was trembling unnaturally, as if it was a bandage that was forcefully shaken. Are you still going to pretend? Gray looked at him with a mocking expression. Edmund's expression froze. His heart trembled violently. He knew that things weren't good, but he still forced himself to be calm. Sir Gray, did you hear any slanderous rumors? Please don't believe them. Those are all false accusations by the Bylan clan's competitors. False accusations? Do you think that the Luolai clan's words are false accusations? You have quite a lot of competitors. Even the Luolai clan is your competitor. The coldness in Gray's eyes seemed to be able to freeze a person. Sir Gray, someone must be trying to frame us. Edmund still wanted to quibble, but Gray didn't want to listen to him anymore. It was possible that someone was trying to frame him. However, if the Kolam clan knew that the Luolai clan was looking for him, why didn't the Bylan clan know about it? Why didn't the Bylan clan remind him, their savior? The answer was obvious. They must have secretly told the Luolai clan about him. Whoosh! A black fog rushed towards Edmund with a snap of Gray's fingers. Edmund had the strength of a king, but this kind of strength couldn't resist Gray at all. Before he could react, he was already enveloped by the black fog and disappeared under it. The head of the Edmund clan is dead. Run. He's here for revenge. He wants to kill us. Seeing Edmund die without a complete corpse under Gray's power, the remaining people in the room paled and scattered in fear. They all burst out with the fastest speed in their lives. Gray looked at these people coldly. A group of people who weren't even kings couldn't escape from him. Pu. Balls of black mist shot out, and everyone who came into contact with them disappeared without a trace. In the end, only Kesha was left in the room. Seeing people she was familiar with disappear in front of her eyes, her face became filled with shock and despair. Seeing Gray look at her, she knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Don't kill me. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything. I could be your woman." As she spoke, she crawled to Gray's feet and looked at Gray with pleading eyes. She hugged Gray's leg with both hands and pressed softly against Gray's leg. Chapter 643. Then I'll grant you your wish, but I'll have to do it in a different way. Gray sneered. Then, he reached out his hand and snapped the man's neck without hesitation. Who's causing trouble in the Bylan family? A loud shout came from outside the room, and a figure quickly rushed into the room. It was an old man, a very old man. His hair was white, and there were only 2 or 3 strands left. Seeing the messy room and the dead Kesha, who had been snapped by Gray, he was shocked and angry. "You killed her." "Yes, I killed her. Not only did I kill her, but I also killed the upper echelons of the Bylan family, including the head of the Bylan family." Gray sneered. The old man didn't look like he had much time left. He should be a king-rank master of the Bylan family who was in seclusion try to break through. Since the Bylan family is in such a state, I don't think you're a good person either. Die. Without giving the old man a chance to speak, Gray attacked with a black mist. The old man couldn't dodge it, and his body collapsed and died like the others. Walking out of the room, Han Xiao saw that the entire Bylan family was in a mess. Everyone was running away in fear. Gray didn't attack again. He didn't plan to attack the servants of the Bylan family. As for those who escaped, he believed that the Kolam family and the other enemies of the Bylan family would be more than happy to kill them all. And that was the truth. In the following days, the Bylan family members who were lucky enough to escape with their lives were found and killed one by one. For Gray, It was very difficult to find these fish that escaped the net, but for the local tyrants of the city, it was very easy. The Byland family's businesses in the city were also divided up. This was a feast. As a family with a king-rank master, the Byland family had a lot of businesses, and each of the factions who divided them up made a lot of money. Gray didn't lose out either. He ransacked the Byland family's treasury, and each of the factions who divided them up tactfully gave him a gift. Compared to the fixed assets of the Byland family, these gifts were more practical for Gray. After all, it was impossible for him to go into business. It was a residence of the Byland family. After the Byland family was annihilated, Gray stayed here. His original residence had been destroyed in the battle. When he learned that the Byland family had such a residence, he unceremoniously occupied it. "Master, the Manuel family has come to visit." A beautiful woman in a purple knee-length dress bowed to Gray. The moment she bowed, her snow-white chest was clearly visible. The woman's figure was extremely hot, especially her voluptuous breasts, which were enough to attract the attention of any man. She was Kesha, who had been killed by Gray. Although he hadn't consumed the spectral demon fox's blood essence to evolve, and his resurrection ability had almost reached its limit, controlling a desolate grade was still not a problem. Therefore, he used his resurrection ability to resurrect the other party. The other party wanted to serve him, and he chose to fulfill the other party's wish. However, it was in a resurrected state. He couldn't be at ease if he kept a person who repaid kindness with ingratitude by his side. Okay. Gray nodded and walked to the parlor. When he arrived at the parlor, he immediately saw the thin man who had left a deep impression on him sitting in the parlor. When he saw Gray, he immediately stood up and greeted him politely. "Your Excellency, Gray." "Sit." Gray's expression was slightly cold as he gestured for the other party to sit down. He then sat on the main seat. Although the Manuel family didn't participate in the siege, it was a fact that they provided convenience to the Raleigh family. Naturally, he didn't have a good impression of this family. Most importantly, he had bought a house in the city and paid a portion of the taxes to the Manuel family. Therefore, he was recognized as a legal resident of the city by the Manuel family. According to the rules of the source world, the Manuel family had the obligation to protect his property and safety in the city. However, not only did the Manuel family not protect him, but they also provided convenience to the attackers. This was the reason why he was dissatisfied with this family. The thin man also knew that his family wasn't favored by Gray. After sitting down, he smiled awkwardly. "Your Excellency Gray, I apologize for the mistake that the Manuel family made this time." If possible, he definitely didn't want to see Gray again. The murderous look on Gray's face from before had left a deep impression on him. Unfortunately, he was still chosen by his family in the end. Although he was extremely unwilling, he could only brace himself and come. If an apology was useful, the Byland family wouldn't have been wiped out by me. Gray's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he looked at the thin man. His voice was cold as he spoke. "Your Excellency Gray is talking about." Cold sweat slid down the thin man's forehead. A large part of the reason he came here was because of the destruction of the Byland family. It was precisely because of the destruction of the Byland family that the Manuel family urgently wanted to find Gray to reconcile, because they were afraid that Gray would treat the Manuel family like how he treated the Byland family. Judging from his strength that Gray displayed in the previous battle, Gray should have such strength. "Your Excellency Gray, the Manuel family is very sorry about this matter. We hope that we can compensate Your Excellency Gray. This is our compensation. Please accept it." The thin man said as he took out a runic portal bag and held it in his hands. His palms were sweating. Whether or not the other party's dissatisfaction could be dispelled depended on whether the other party was satisfied with the Manuel family's compensation. Gray turned to look at Kesha, who was standing next to him. Kesha understood and walked forward, took the runic portal bag, and handed it to Gray. The thin man stole a glance at Kesha. He had long noticed that Kesha was the only survivor of the Byland family. Now that he saw her behaving like a servant, he immediately had a certain impression of Gray in his heart. After all, he was a young man full of energy and had extremely strong needs in certain aspects. He wondered if he should also choose a few beautiful women from the family and send them over. The only problem was that he might not be able to find someone in the family who was as beautiful as the one in front of him. After all, the other party's beauty was very famous in Manuel City. A trace of blood energy pierced into the runic patterns of the runic portal bag. The contents of the runic portal bag appeared before Gray's eyes. What entered his eyes was a purplish-black color. Those were magic coins one after another. Judging from a volume, there should be about 3 million magic coins. With the purchasing power of magic coins in the source world, 3 million magic coins was definitely an extremely large amount of wealth. In order to appease his anger, the Manuel family had indeed put in a lot of effort. Gray put away the runic portal bag. He was quite satisfied with the Manuel family's compensation. He looked at the thin man, and the coldness in his eyes softened slightly. This is the only time, and also the last time. If there's a next time, you will end up like the Byland family. I understand. The task was finally completed. The thin man let out a long sigh of relief. Due to his relaxed mood, he almost collapsed on the chair. Being forced to such an extent by the other party and groveling to make compensation, wasn't it sullen? Of course it was. But no matter how sullen it was, they had to bear with it. They had already received the specific casualties of the Rawl family from the Rawl family. From Magic Light Warriors. For Magic Light Warriors had died in the battle not long ago. However, the deaths of 4 Magic Light Warriors were like stones thrown into the sea. They didn't even cause a single ripple. They didn't even hurt the other party. At the thought of this, the Manuel family's higher-ups couldn't help but feel a chill from head to toe. The other party wasn't someone they could contend with. Therefore, before Gray went to them, he was ordered by the family to take the initiative to bring compensation and seek forgiveness. Now that this goal was achieved, he could finally heave a sigh of relief. The crisis of the extinction of the family was finally resolved. Your Majesty Gray, the Rawl family asked us to convey a message. They hope to reconcile with you. After a slight hesitation, the skinny man said. However, before he could finish, he was already interrupted by Gray. You'd better not get involved in the Rawl family's matters. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. As for the Rawl family, there's no possibility of reconciliation. Gray's voice was cold. There seemed to be a cold wind whistling in the room. The temperature in the air seemed to have dropped to negative dozens of degrees. Being attacked by this cold, the thin man couldn't help but shiver. I understand. Not daring to say anything else, he hurriedly bade farewell and left. He was extremely glad that his family had made the right decision. If he had been a little later, the Manuel family might have been included in the list of must-kill like the Rawl family. Looking at the back of the thin man, Gray sneered. Although the Rawl family had suffered heavy losses in both confrontations, and the only loss he had was a residence, he didn't intend to let the Rawl family off. They didn't suffer heavy losses because he was powerful. If it had been someone weaker, they would have been killed countless times. Naturally, this matter wouldn't have ended just like that. In the following days, Gray lived in seclusion. Although he already had the intention to kill the Rawl family, he didn't immediately set off for the city where the Rawl family was located. Instead, he cultivated step by step in his residence. He wasn't afraid that the Rawl family would escape. The Rawl family couldn't escape. If the Rawl family resolutely chose to escape, he might think more highly of the Rawl family. According to the information he had gathered, the Rawl family was also the ruler of a city like the Manuel family. If the Rawl family chose to escape, they would have to give up the city. For the Rawl family, this was an almost unbearable loss. Therefore, Gray wasn't in a hurry to take revenge. He planned to first consume the blood of the spectral magic fox before seeking revenge on the Rawl family. This would raise the bloodline level of the spectral magic fox and make his resurrection ability stronger. Perhaps controlling a family with a city and having this family provide him with an endless supply of cultivation resources was a better choice than destroying this family. Chapter 644. A week later, the phantom of the devil-poisoned dragon disappeared from the training room. A sweaty Gray exited from the training room. I can finally consume the spectral fox's blood and transform. Gray's eyes shone as he walked toward the bathroom. Kesha followed behind him, preparing to help Gray bathe and change his clothes. She had been serving Gray like this for the past few days. No need for that today. Without my orders, no one is allowed to disturb me. After giving the order, Gray locked the bathroom door from the inside. He then put Marina on guard and laid down in the bathtub, taking out the spectral fox's blood essence. The blue crystal bottle was about 3 inches tall, and its surface was exquisitely carved. There was an exquisite pattern of the magic ghost fox on it. This was the vessel that contained the magic ghost fox's blood essence, and it was also the main culprit behind Gray's series of troubles. Although this kind of trouble was not necessarily a bad thing for Gray, and instead, he had profited greatly. He might even obtain an endless supply of resources because of this. But it was a fact that this was the cause of all the troubles. Why is the Raleigh family looking for the spectral fox's blood essence? This thought flashed through Gray's mind and was thrown to the back of his mind. He unscrewed the cork of the bottle and swallowed the spectral fox's blood essence. Pop, pop, pop! Suddenly, wave after wave of stabbing pain appeared. It was as if long needles were piercing Gray's head and drilling into it. It was so painful that Gray's head felt like it was going to split open, and he broke out in cold sweat. To be precise, it was not Gray's head that was hurting, but Gray's soul. The spectral ability was a soul-type ability. Consuming the blood of a blood fiend with such an ability to transform would naturally target the soul. This was a transformation targeted at the soul. Many people would never experience the pain of the soul in their entire life because there were very few blood fiends with soul-type abilities and even fewer people who cultivated soul-type blood arts. Gray was fortunate enough to experience it, and this was not the first time. He had also experienced it once when he swallowed the blood of the desolate-level fox-type blood fiend. Humph! Gray's face was contorted from the pain, and his hair was drenched in sweat. He let out a muffled groan from the pain as he endured the splitting headache. He had already expected such a situation, but he couldn't avoid it. This was the price he had to pay to obtain strength. The only thing he could do was to endure the painful transformation process. After a long time, perhaps half an hour or perhaps 4 or 5 hours, the pain gradually disappeared. Gray was half lying in the bathtub as if he had collapsed. The pain related to the transformation of the soul was much more intense than the other transformations. It was almost several times more painful than the transformations caused by swallowing other types of blood. The upper limit of the resurrection ability should have been increased. After a while, Gray stood up and thought to himself. Before this, his resurrection power was limited to 4 king class or 1 magic light class. Now, considering that he was king class, it should be 4 magic light class or 1 annihilation class. At most, he could resurrect an annihilation class and have the combat power of an annihilation class. That was the limit of his resurrection power. Of course, that was only in theory. In reality, it should not have been possible. With his resurrection power, he had already resurrected many people. As long as those people existed, he would not be able to resurrect an annihilation class. So, he had to settle for the next best thing, which was to resurrect a magic light class. For me now, if I could resurrect a 5th-tier magic light class, it would be a great help. But it is a shame that I cannot resurrect an annihilation class. I don't know if I can change this if I combine more powers. In theory, he could resurrect an annihilation class, but in reality, he could not. It was a shame. Gray could not help but think about combining more powers to change this. His resurrection power was a combination of corpse control and soul power. If he combined a 3rd, 4th, or even 5th power, it would become a rule power. Perhaps he could change this and get rid of this limitation. It is time to attack the Luo Lai family. Standing up from the bathtub, Gray's eyes were cold. The level of his resurrection power had increased. He could now resurrect magic light. So, it was time to attack the Luo Lai family. In Gray's eyes, the Rawl clan, which was in charge of a city, was like a chicken that could lay eggs. Gray's plan was to control this clan in his hands, and use this clan's endless supply of resources for his cultivation. If he wanted the Luo Lai family to submit to him and control the Luo Lai family, he had to have the resurrection power. That was why he had waited until now. In the Luo Lai family's meeting room, the Luo Lai family's upper echelons were having a discussion. Usually, every meeting would be filled to the brim, but now, there were only a few empty seats left. It wasn't that the owners of these empty seats didn't come, but that they would never come. They had all died in Wellman City. We can't just sit here and wait. We have to fight back. We have to fight back. Driven by fear and hesitation, a graceful and luxurious woman in a formal dress said with a face full of excitement, "Fight back. How do we fight back? For Magic Light Masters have died in his hands. With our remaining strength, do you think we are a match for him?" A man's words were like a splash of cold water on the noblewoman. The noblewoman's agitated emotions cooled down, and her heart turned cold. The Luo Lai family had a total of 5 Magic Light Masters. They had sent 4 Magic Light Masters the last time, but all of them had died in the hands of the enemy. Now, there was only 1 Magic Light Master left in the family. How could they be a match for the enemy? We can pay a price to get the other families to attack. As long as the price is high enough, I believe the other families will be tempted. A man suggested. His words lifted the spirits of many people. It was as if they had grasped at a life-saving straw. Yes, we can pay a price to get the other families to attack. No matter how strong he is, he will not be a match for the other families. Looking at these people who thought they had grasped a chance at survival and were now in high spirits, the Raleigh family patriarch, Aubrey Raleigh, who was also the last remaining demon light powerhouse of the Raleigh family, shook his head in disappointment. Do you still not understand? Now, our enemy is not only Grey Fergus, but also the other families. After losing 4 demon light powerhouses, the Luo Lai family is at its weakest. All the great families are already waiting to divide the Luo Lai family. In this situation, how could they possibly cooperate with the Luo Lai family? The head of the Rawl family, Aubrey Rawl, revealed a mocking smile. These people were too naive. To a certain extent, the interests of the other families were aligned with those of Grey Fergus. If Grey Fergus destroyed the Luo Lai family, he would at most be able to take away the treasures that could be easily taken away. However, he would not be able to take away the city, nor would he be able to manage it. After all, managing a city was not a simple matter. It required too much manpower. Now, the other families have been waiting for this. They were waiting for the Luo Lai family to be destroyed, waiting for Grey Fergus to leave. Then, they would all rush forward to divide and fight for Luo Lai City. Then what do we do? The people who had just become excited were like balloons that had been punctured. They immediately became listless and looked hopefully at Aubrey Luo Lai. Not only was he the head of the Luo Lai family, he was also the only Magic Light Master. Perhaps he would have a solution. The only thing we can do now is to give up Luo Lai City and escape with what we can. Aubrey Luo Lai sighed in the face of the hopeful gazes. In the face of absolute power, all calculations were useless. Even if he had 1,000 schemes, he could not execute them. Give up Luo Lai City? How can we do that? If we lose Luo Lai City, the Luo Lai family will lose its foundation. Master, is there any other way? Giving up Luo Lai City is really... Many people shook their heads. They were used to enjoying the status of being able to call the wind and summon the rain in Luo Lai City. They were really unwilling to give up their foundation here. Moreover, if they lost their foundation, the Luo Lai family would very likely be unable to recover from this setback. Many families that were originally strong and prosperous, but had now declined beyond recognition, were the best examples. This discussion had already continued for several days, but there had been no conclusion. They could not reach a consensus on whether to give up Luo Lai City or not. Grey Fergus has left Manwell City. It's very likely that he's heading for Luo Lai City. At this moment, a man pushed open the door of the meeting room and said while panting, "Boom!" It was as if a sudden clap of thunder had exploded in the meeting room. The expressions of everyone in the meeting room changed, and some even trembled. Grey Fergus was finally ready to make a move against the Luo Lai family. "Quick, activate the city's defensive formation." Many people cried out nervously, praying in their hearts that the defensive formation would be able to stop the other party. A few hours later, Gray appeared outside Luo Lai City. A pair of greenish-black wings appeared on his back as he flew in the sky and sized up Luo Lai City. Like Manuel City, it was a city with a high rune culture. The use of runes could be seen in many places in the city. The origin world had already used rune technology in all aspects of life. This was a city that was no less prosperous than Manuel City, and even slightly more prosperous than Manuel City. It was said that there were many mineral deposits near this city, and it was these mineral deposits that maintained the prosperity of this city. Gray didn't enter the city because there was a white hemispherical defensive barrier outside the city. It protected the entire city, making it impossible for Gray to enter. Whoosh! Gray tried to attack, and a purple time law ability collided with the hemispherical white barrier. Pung! Only a slight ripple appeared on the surface of the hemispherical white barrier before it returned to normal. Clearly, Gray's attack had almost no effect on the hemispherical barrier. A layer of tortoise shell? Then let me see how hard a tortoise shell really is. Looking at this white barrier, Gray sneered, and with a wave of his hand, Marina appeared. Stepping on the air, Marina flew in the air, and after his speed soared to the limit, he suddenly punched the white barrier. In his lifetime, he was a Magic Light warrior at the 5th level of Magic Light. Even if he only had the strength of his physical body, his battle strength was above Gray's. Boom! The powerful blow bombarded the white barrier, and the movement caused was indeed greater than that of Gray's. Ripples appeared on the surface of the white barrier, but the white barrier still could not be broken. Soon, the white barrier returned to normal. Continue. Commanding Marina to continue attacking the white barrier, Gray also joined in. Boom, boom, boom. Under the continuous attacks of the two, loud noises appeared near the white barrier, as if thunder was exploding in the sky one after another. What a strong defense! More than 10 minutes later, Gray retreated, looking at the white barrier with a slightly dignified gaze. Even if he and Marina joined forces, they could not have much impact on the defensive barrier. After attacking for more than 10 minutes, he did not feel the defensive barrier weaken. Obviously, even if he and Marina joined forces, the power of their attacks did not exceed the defensive limit of the defensive barrier. Chapter 645. Someone's attacking Raleigh City. Is there going to be a family war? Following Gray and Marina's successive attacks, loud noises spread throughout the city. Many residents of the city walked out of their houses in panic and horror, looking in the direction of the sound. A few hours ago, Raleigh City had suddenly banned entry and exit and activated a defensive barrier. At that time, they had vaguely guessed that there might be a powerful enemy attacking. Now, they had received confirmation that there was indeed a powerful enemy attacking. This made them anxious and frightened. Who would be the most seriously affected when a family war broke out, especially in the city? It was them, the residents of the city. In the previous battle in Manuel City, although Gray had tried his best to control the range of the power, more than 100 residents had still died in the battle. In the face of the destructive power of Magic Light, ordinary residents were as weak as ants. If they were not careful, they would be affected and die. Gray Fergus is attacking. Among these people, there was no sign of the various families in the city. The families in the city had already received the news from various channels that the Raleigh family had provoked a powerful enemy. They either temporarily evacuated Raleigh City and hid in other cities to watch from afar, or hid in sturdy secret rooms to wait for the storm to pass. The only family forces that could be seen in the city were the people of the Raleigh family. Their complexions were not much better than the ordinary residents. All of them looked panicked and solemn. They climbed up the city walls and anxiously watched the defensive barrier that was under continuous attack. Gray Fergus's strength was not something the Raleigh family could withstand. There was no doubt about that. The defensive barrier that the family had set up in the city for hundreds of years was their last line of defense. If even this layer of defensive barrier could not stop the enemy, then what awaited them was likely a massacre, just like their companions who had died in Manuel City. It's blocked. The defensive barrier blocked their attack. seeing that Gray and the other person had been attacking for more than 10 minutes without causing any damage to the defensive barrier. The people of the Raleigh family could not help but sigh in relief. They wiped the cold sweat that had already crept up their foreheads. The defensive barrier was the reason why they were unwilling to leave the city. Fortunately, the defensive barrier did not disappoint them and blocked the enemy's attack. Your Excellency Gray, I'm Aubrey Rawle, the head of the Rawle family. I know that you're very angry with the Rawle family for what we've done, and we're willing to compensate for our mistakes. Please spare the Rawle family this time. On the city wall, the head of the Rawle family, Aubrey Rawle, who was wearing battle armor and surrounded by the members of the Rawle family, also let out a sigh of relief before opening his mouth to speak. Spare the Raleigh family? Flying in the air, Gray had a cold smile on his face as he looked down at the head of the Rawle family, Aubrey Rawle. It's not impossible. What are your conditions? Aubrey Raleigh and the other members of the Raleigh family were overjoyed to see the other party relenting. He wasn't afraid that the other party's conditions would be exaggerated, but he was afraid that the other party would reject him without any room for negotiation. As long as there was room for negotiation, there would be a chance to mediate, and they would be able to negotiate the exaggerated conditions into something both parties could accept. Even if the conditions were more exaggerated, as long as they could resolve this crisis and get a chance to breathe, they would be willing to accept it. Slaves belong to me, slaves for generations to come. Standing in the air, Gray curled up the corner of his mouth to a certain degree. Impossible, impossible. You want the Rawle family to be slaves for generations to come? Impossible. Aubrey Rawle didn't even respond to Gray's conditions, but many of the Rawle family members were already roaring angrily. They were so angry that their faces were flushed red and their eyes were spitting fire. They looked like they wanted to charge out and fight Gray to the death. It was rare for them, who had been living like princes, to be so bloody. Was a slave. Everything belonged to the master, and their life and death were at the master's mercy. Just like Kinsa, even her body belonged to the master, Gray. This was a slave, making the Rawle family, who owned a city, controlled the lives of millions of people, and were used to being high and mighty. Slaves was even more unbearable than killing them. Your Excellency Gray, the Rawle family will never agree to your conditions, Aubrey Rawle said with an ashen face as he forcefully suppressed the surging anger in his heart. Becoming a slave was the most humiliating way to surrender in the Origin world. He couldn't agree to it no matter what. If he agreed, the Rawle family would never be able to raise their heads again, and he would be a sinner of the Rawle family. Facing the fiery gazes directed at him, Gray's expression remained the same, and he looked back at them with great interest. Now that they knew how to be angry, why didn't they think about his anger when they tried to take him by force, and when they failed to take him by force and sent experts to kill him? People had to pay the price for what they did. Since the Rawle family wanted his life, they naturally had to pay with their lives. Being a slave for generations was already a relatively mild condition. At least he would still be alive, even if his life would no longer belong to him. These are my conditions. If you don't agree, then I'll have no choice but to wipe out the Rawle family. Gray looked at Aubrey Rawle, and the coldness in his eyes even made Aubrey, a magic light expert, not dare to look straight at him. Arrogant. You think you can wipe out the Rawle family? With a defensive barrier, my Rawle family is already in an invincible position. Right. As long as we don't leave the city, he can't do anything to us. In the Rawle family, there were old men fuming with anger, middle-aged men with bloodshot eyes, and young men with smug expressions. Gray's humiliating conditions had infuriated the Rawle family, and the fact that the defensive barrier had not been breached under Gray's attacks gave the Rawle family great confidence. They began to curse without restraint. Gray's cold gaze swept over the cursing people one by one. Everyone who was swept by his gaze couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Their bodies were faintly cold, and a cold air poured into their bodies. They subconsciously lowered their heads. But when they remembered that the defensive barrier was in place and that the other party could not enter the city, they could not help but muster the courage to glare back at Gray. Do you really think that I can't do anything to you with this turtle shell? With a cold face, Gray turned and flew away from Rawl City. Gray Fergus left. Ha! Knowing that he can't do anything to the defensive barrier, Gray Fergus left with his tail between his legs. So what if he's strong? If he can't break the defensive barrier, he could forget about doing anything to my Rawl family. Seeing Gray turn around and leave, the people of the Raleigh family were filled with excitement, as if they had won a battle. But in fact, from just now until now, under Gray's power, their hearts were trembling, and they did not dare to walk out of the defensive barrier. This matter is far from over. Only the patriarch, Aubrey Rawl, and a few others did not relax, and their hearts were still filled with deep worry. Although the defensive barrier had stopped the enemy and caused them to return empty-handed, it was impossible for the defensive barrier to remain open all the time. For a short period of time, the resources in the city would be sufficient for self-sufficiency. However, as time passed, the city would inevitably run out of resources. So the threat was far from over. As long as they did not reach an agreement with the other party, the threat would not be resolved. Thump, thump, thump. With the crisis temporarily resolved, the Rawl family prepared to withdraw from the city wall and retreat back into the city. But at this moment, a huge commotion suddenly appeared, like a beating drum, one after another, extremely rhythmic. What's going on? What's going on? The members of the Rawl family looked in the direction of the sound, and then their expressions changed. Some of their eyes widened in shock, and some of them trembled in fear. In the distance, a huge monster was striding over. Its forelegs were not moving at a fast pace, but its speed was extremely terrifying. Every step it took was enough to move dozens of meters forward. This was a huge monster with a body length of more than 40 meters. Its body was not covered with scales, but a black cuticle with a defense that was no weaker than scales. Its huge eyes were the size of millstones, and its slightly flat mouth revealed crisscrossing sharp teeth, each of which was like a giant blade. Its body was covered with thick, sharp spikes, especially its tail, which was so densely packed that it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. A disaster-level blood beast. Bramble calamity crocodile. No. How is this possible? How can a disaster-level blood beast appear here? How can this be? It's over. Rawl City is finished. Everyone's expression turned into despair, and some of them were so frightened that they screamed without caring about their image. If it was any other time, their companions beside them would definitely remind them to pay attention to their manners. But at this moment, no one did so. It did not mean that their companions were more likely to forget their manners than them. How can this be? Is the Rawl family destined to be destroyed? With dejection in his eyes, Aubrey Rawl's face was filled with a bitter smile. A disaster-level blood beast was the embodiment of disaster. Wherever it appeared, it would definitely bring about a devastating disaster. Rawl City was not a city near the Forbidden Forest, but they did not expect to encounter such a disaster. Look, there's someone on the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's back. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in disbelief. When the others looked over, they were immediately stunned. Behind the Bramble Calamity Crocodile, a person's figure could be clearly seen. It was a black-haired young man. His hair was as black as ink, and his figure was tall and slender. The clothes on his body fluttered in the wind, making him look very elegant. At this moment, the other party was looking at Rawl City, his eyes cold and indifferent. It's him. It's Gray Fergus. How can this be? He actually has a disaster-level beast. The faces of the Rawl family members were as white as a sheet of paper. The ones who had cursed Gray the most arrogantly were even trembling and sitting on the ground in fear. The defensive barrier was where their confidence came from, but now it seemed that this confidence was no longer as secure as it used to be. They could already imagine what awaited them after the other party broke through the defensive barrier. Chapter 646. Thump, 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 thump. The Bramble Calamity Crocodile stood outside Raleigh City. Its enormous height made it even taller than the city walls. The members of the Raleigh family on the city walls could clearly see its head full of sharp teeth. The powerful visual impact caused them to feel a chill from head to toe. Your Excellency Gray, We can sit down and slowly discuss the terms of compensation that both sides can accept. Aubrey Raleigh looked at Gray, who was standing on the bramble calamity crocodile. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that the bramble calamity crocodile in front of him was not alive. It was controlled by a corpse-controlling ability, but he did not know if it was controlled by the opponent's ability or a magical weapon. However, even if it was not alive, the destructive power of the bramble calamity crocodile was extremely terrifying. According to what he knew, the bramble calamity crocodile's physical strength was comparable to a calamity-grade creature. In the face of an attack of this level, he was completely unsure if the city's defensive barrier could withstand it. Sure, but only after I break the defensive barrier. Standing on the bramble calamity crocodile, Gray's gaze swept across the members of the Raleigh family one after another. This time, the people who were swept by his gaze were no longer as arrogant as before. Instead, their faces were pale and their bodies were slightly trembling. Attack! Gray gave the order to the bramble calamity crocodile to attack. Suddenly, the bramble calamity crocodile's huge tail swung fiercely at the city's defensive barrier. Boom! A loud sound rang out. It was as if mountains were collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. The entire city and the surrounding area shook violently. The white barrier that was hit by the bramble calamity crocodile's huge tail rippled violently, and faint cracks could be seen on its surface. With just one attack, the white barrier that Gray and Marna could not deal with showed signs of damage. This was the strength of the bramble calamity crocodile. The bramble calamity crocodile was a disaster-grade blood beast with earth elemental abilities. However, that was not all. Its strength and defense were comparable to a disaster-grade blood beast. Gray had only learned about it after reading through the Byland family's library. The books that he had read in the past did not contain any records of blood beasts of calamity grade and above. Therefore, he was completely clueless about blood beasts of calamity grade and above. Fortunately, the books of the Byland family allowed him to gain some understanding in this area. It was not as clueless as before. Cracks have appeared on the defensive barrier. The defensive barrier can't stop the bramble calamity crocodile's attack. Seeing the crack on the white barrier, everyone from the Luo Lai family understood what it meant. Their faces turned pale without a trace of blood. Some people couldn't help but urinate out of fear and despair, releasing a foul stench. Some people retreated out of fear and actually fell down from the city wall. Your Excellency Gray, please stop. Everything can be negotiated. Aubrey Luo Lai's heart was also palpitating. His body instinctively wanted to tremble, but he forcefully suppressed it. Even if he was a magic light warrior, in front of the destructive power of a disaster-grade blood beast, he still had the urge to bow down. In the face of such destructive power, a magic light warrior was just a slightly stronger insect. I will stop, but not now. Looking at the Luo Lai family's ugliness, Gray's face was full of indifference. Only by breaking the defensive barrier and tearing apart the last bit of the Luo Lai family's confidence would he be able to completely destroy the psychological barrier of the Luo Lai family and make them willingly become his slaves. Although he had the ability to resurrect, he did not intend to resurrect too many people. He only intended to control the Luo Lai family's patriarch, who was a magic light warrior. As for the rest, he intended to use his strength to force them to submit. People always cherish their lives. When they realized that if they did not submit, death would be the only outcome waiting for them. In fact, there were very few people who would rather die than submit. If there really were such people, Gray naturally did not recommend killing them. He did not feel sorry for the loss of talents. All he needed was a group of subordinates who would bow and scrape at his feet, who would govern this city and provide him with an endless supply of resources. He did not care about the deaths. As long as there were enough people left to control the city, it was fine. Rumble, rumble. The bramble calamity crocodile's giant tail slammed into the white barrier again and again, producing loud bangs one after another. Every loud bang seemed to strike the hearts of the Luo Lai family's members, causing their hearts to beat wildly. This was because every loud bang brought them closer and closer to death. Under the pressure of despair, some people's expressions actually became sluggish. They were actually scared silly. It was not that their psychological endurance was weak, but the fear that the bramble calamity crocodile brought to them was too intense. As people of the origin world, they understood the terror of a disaster-grade blood beast more than Gray. They understood what kind of ending awaited them once the defensive barrier was broken. Don't attack anymore. I'm willing to be your slave. Those who were not scared silly were not much better off. Many people had a mental breakdown and no longer had their previous arrogance. They sat on the ground and begged for mercy. Gray looked at the ugly state of the Luo Lai family's people indifferently. There was only coldness in his eyes, and there was no trace of guilt. The situation had developed to this point because the Luo Lai family had asked for it. After being high and mighty for a long time, the Luo Lai family had become arrogant and treated other people's lives as a game. They could kill and take as they pleased. What he was doing now was just what they often did. Crack. More and more cracks appeared on the surface of the white barrier. Like a cracked glass, spiderweb-like cracks appeared. Finally, with a crisp sound, the white barrier shattered, turning into countless white lights and dissipating. There was no longer any obstruction between Gray and the Raleigh family. The bramble calamity crocodile lowered its huge head and stared at the Luo Lai family with its millstone-sized eyes. The Luo Lai family's people could not help but retreat to the edge of the city wall. But it was futile. With the bramble calamity crocodile's speed, it could easily cross this distance if it wanted to attack. Atop the bramble calamity crocodile's head, Gray looked at the Luo Lai family patriarch, Aubrey Luo Lai. I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to serve as slaves for generations to come? The Luo Lai family will never become slaves. Facing the bramble calamity crocodile's pressure, Aubrey Luo Lai's face was grim and cold sweat the size of beans dripped down his face. Is that so? That's truly regrettable. Gray's expression was cold. A moment later, the bramble calamity crocodile raised its massive claw and swung it at Aubrey Luo Lai. Aubrey Luo Lai felt his hair stand on end as he dodged in fear. But no matter how fast he was, how could he be faster than the bramble calamity crocodile? Whoosh! A massive claw the size of a room slammed into him and slammed him into the city wall. Countless bones in his body were broken, and his entire body was covered in blood. He had sunk deep into the city wall, and there was no sign of movement. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The reason Gray had been able to escape from the calamity-grade blood fiend's attack back then was because under the effect of the law of time, Maruna's speed had already surpassed that of an ordinary calamity-grade blood fiend. Aubrey Luo Lai's speed was clearly not comparable. The Patriarch is dead. Run. The Magic Light Realm Patriarch, Aubrey Luo Lai, had died in a single blow. The remaining members of the Luo Lai family had completely lost their will to fight. They turned around in despair and fear, jumping off the city wall and fleeing into the city. Pung! Outside the city wall, the bramble calamity crocodile's 4 legs bent slightly and then fiercely stomped on the ground. Its 40-meter-long body soared into the air, crossing the city wall and leaping into the city. As its massive body landed, a large number of buildings collapsed, and the first to bear the brunt of the impact were the members of the Luo Lai family at the very front. Puff! Under the giant claw that was the size of a room, the people at the very front were trampled into meat paste. Those who were lucky enough to escape with their lives were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground, feces and urine flowing out of their bodies. If anyone dares to run, they will end up like you. Standing on the bramble calamity crocodile, Gray coldly said. His voice was not loud, but the bramble calamity crocodile under his feet gave his words a powerful deterrent. Everyone who was fleeing in fear could not help but stop. Choose. Become my slave, or die. Gray's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he looked at the remaining people. Dream on. The Luo Lai family will never stoop so low as to become a slave. An elder shouted angrily, but in the next moment, a giant claw slammed down, and his voice was abruptly cut off. The giant claw lifted up, and his body had already disappeared. Only a pile of meat paste was left behind, and he could not even maintain his human form. Who else objects? The giant claw that was lifted up seemed as if it would fall at any moment. It was dripping with blood, both the elder's blood and the blood of the people who had just died. I am willing to be your slave. I'm also willing to be your slave. Knowing that resistance would only result in death, and that there was no one else like the elder, the members of the Luo Lai family lowered their heads and bit their lips until they bled. At this moment, their pride and glory had been torn to shreds, but at the same time, the pressure had also disappeared. With the pressure gone, their bodies seemed to have lost all strength, and they collapsed to the ground, greedily gasping for fresh air. Some people couldn't help but console themselves. Perhaps following a powerful master was not a bad thing. Although they had lost their freedom, they now had a powerful backer, and the Luo Lai family might become even more prosperous. Very good. Gray nodded in satisfaction. He had finally achieved his goal. Compared to directly killing them, it had taken much more effort, but the rewards were also greater. The resources of a clan that controlled a city would be provided to him for his use, allowing him to increase his strength even faster. Jumping off the bramble calamity crocodile, Gray picked up the blood-soaked body of the Luo Lai family's patriarch, Aubrey Luo Lai, and flew toward a forest outside the city. Although the Luo Lai family had already submitted, it was still necessary to plant a trustworthy person. Otherwise, the Luo Lai family might feign obedience on the surface, but secretly do things behind his back that would harm his interests. Chapter 647. In the city center of the Rawl family, Gray followed the Rawl family's patriarch, Aubrey, into the patriarch's study under the sullen gazes of the Rawl family members. After entering the study, Gray sat on a cool leather chair made of the leather of some kind of ice element blood beast. Aubrey, on the other hand, stood respectfully. There was not the slightest trace of dissatisfaction or grievance in his eyes. In fact, Aubrey had died when he was slapped into the city wall by the thorny calamity crocodile. Although the body that appeared in front of everyone was still his original body, his soul was already that of a different person. Tell me, why is the Rawl family searching for the blood essence of the ghost fox at all costs? Gray looked at Aubrey and asked. This was a question he had been thinking about for the past few days. The Rawl family's enthusiasm for the blood essence of the ghost fox was obviously abnormal. For this, they did not hesitate to become enemies with him. If someone said that there was no secret behind this, Gray would not believe it no matter what. Lord Gray, the reason why the Aubrey family is searching for the blood essence of the ghost fox at all costs is to refine the ghost potion. This is a potion that can make you fearless of ghosts for a period of time. After being resurrected by the resurrection ability, Aubrey, who was completely loyal to Gray, did not hide anything and spoke of the reason why the Rawl family was searching for the blood essence of the ghost fox. To refine a potion that can make you fearless of ghosts for a period of time, Gray asked with a playful look on his face. Could it be that the Rawl family has discovered some ghost territory? In the Byland family's library, Gray had once seen an interesting record. It was impossible to verify how long the history of the source world could be traced back. It was certain that the history was extremely long. During such a long time, many terrifying wars had broken out, and each time, several Lorang powerhouses had participated. The disasters caused were unimaginable. Just like how humans could not care about the life and death of ants under their feet, the Lorang powerhouses could not care about the life and death of ordinary people. Too many people had died in the disasters, and their souls had gathered and turned into ghosts. In the end, the places where the terrifying wars had broken out formed special ghost territories. The Spectre Domain, the gathering place of specters, was a place shrouded in fog all year round. Specters were afraid of sunlight and couldn't appear during the day. However, when there were enough specters, this rule was broken. The place where they gathered would be shrouded in fog, and sunlight couldn't penetrate it. Even during the day, they could still wander outside. That's right. When the Luo Lai family was excavating a mine, they discovered a ghost territory underground. Because of this, They were looking for the blood essence of the ghost demon fox. They wanted me to refine the ghost medicine. Aubrey replied respectfully. You're also a master alchemist? Gray was slightly surprised and even pleasantly surprised. Aubrey himself wasn't very strong. He was only at the first tier of magic light. This kind of strength couldn't increase Gray's combat strength. He wouldn't be of much help in battle. The reason why he used the resurrection ability to resurrect Luo Lai was mainly because he valued Luo Lai's identity. He wanted to use Luo Lai to control the Luo Lai family and turn it into his own resource point. However, he didn't expect Luo Lai to be able to refine the ghost medicine. He couldn't help but feel that reviving Luo Lai wasn't any less valuable than reviving a fifth tier of magic light. To be able to refine the ghost medicine using the blood essence of the ghost demon fox, Luo Lai was definitely a master alchemist. With a master alchemist as a subordinate, as long as he could guarantee a supply of medicinal ingredients, he definitely wouldn't be lacking in medicinal ingredients. Yes, Lord Gray, Aubrey replied respectfully. Aubrey respectfully complied. Since he had Aubrey's soul memories, he was naturally able to refine magic potions. Very good. Gray nodded in satisfaction. What was an unexpected surprise? This was probably what it meant when he only wanted to control the Luo Lai family. He didn't expect to unexpectedly obtain a master alchemist. The news of Gray entering Luo Lai City quickly spread from the Luo Lai City. Luo Lai City, which had lost the Luo Lai family, was a huge piece of fat meat. Therefore, all the great families had been watching the battle between Gray and the Luo Lai family closely. They were waiting for the Luo Lai family to be destroyed and become the last hunter to occupy Luo Lai City. Some families were even thinking that if Gray couldn't take Luo Lai City, then they would stand out and cooperate with Gray to take Luo Lai City. Of course, they would naturally want to get a share of the benefits after taking Luo Lai City. There were spies planted in Luo Lai City by the various families. Therefore, when Luo Lai City was taken, the news quickly spread to the various families. In a room that was kept cool under the runic matrices, a handsome man with a braided beard sat on a leather sofa. On his left and right sides were two beautiful female servants. They hugged his left and right hands softly and were polishing his nails with a nail sharpener. This man looked to be in his 30s. He was the head of the Quates family, Sealed Quates. The reason why he looked so young was because he was very powerful. He had become a king-level master long ago. Master, there's news from Luo Lai City. A voluptuous woman wearing a female housekeeper's uniform that accentuated her figure walked over to him and said respectfully. It was not rare to see a woman as a housekeeper in the source world. If there's something to do, the secretary will do it. If there's nothing to do, the secretary will do it. Obviously, this was also applicable in this world. Read it. Sealed Quates nodded slightly and gestured for the woman to open the letter and read it to him. The voluptuous woman responded, then opened the letter and read it aloud. The Luo Lai family has submitted to Gray Fergus. Sealed Quates could not help but frown when he heard the voluptuous woman read out the contents. This result was completely different from what he had expected. It was also not the result that he had expected. Originally, he had expected Gray Fergus to destroy the Luo Lai family and then leave Luo Lai City after plundering the Luo Lai family. However, the Luo Lai family had not been destroyed. Not only that, but they had also submitted to Gray Fergus. This was completely different from what he had expected. Gray Fergus, do you want to incur the public's wrath? Sealed Quates' face was cold. Sensing their master's anger, the two maids beside him could not help but tremble slightly. Their soft parts squeezed even tighter. The Luo Lai family had submitted to Gray Fergus, which meant that Luo Lai City had become Gray Fergus's property. This was obviously completely different from what the other families had expected. He could already imagine how the other families would react when they heard this news. It could be said that Gray Fergus had not destroyed the Luo Lai family, but had instead taken the Luo Lai family for his own use. This had already affected the interests of the other families and would definitely incur the wrath of the other families. All the benefits had been taken by Gray Fergus alone. This was something that the other families would never allow. Although Grey Fergus was powerful, he would definitely not be a match for the other families if they joined forces. Grey Fergus is still too young. He can't even understand such a simple logic. Take what you should, and don't touch what you shouldn't. Otherwise, you'll get into big trouble. His expression was cold, and his eyes were cold. He was thinking about whether he should become the person who connected the other families. Although this would create a deep grudge with Grey Fergus, the benefits he would gain would definitely be the greatest among the other families. However, the buxom woman's next words instantly extinguished the anger that had just risen in his heart. Not only did it extinguish, but he also felt his entire body turn cold, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Grey Fergus has a bramble calamity crocodile as his beast. This was unexpected news, and it was extremely impactful. This news was definitely like a hurricane. Not only was the other party strong, but the servants who followed him were also very strong. Moreover, he had a beast that had reached the level of disaster. A disaster-level blood beast. What was a disaster-level blood beast? It was like a disaster that brought destruction. This was a disaster-level blood beast. In an instant, the plan that had just arisen was forcefully extinguished. He did not even dare to think about it in his mind. This plan was no different from seeking death. If it was just Grey Fergus and his servant, the other families would definitely be able to resist and suppress them if they joined forces. However, this did not include a disaster-level blood beast. Disaster level was the same level, but there was a difference of 5 levels between the destruction level and the magic light level. From this, it was not difficult to see the strength of the disaster level. It was a strength that was on a completely different level from the magic light level. It could be said that even if the other families all joined forces, they would definitely not be a match for this bramble calamity crocodile. They might not even be able to break through its defenses. Carefully choose a congratulatory gift. I'm going to release City. After thinking for a while, he hurriedly ordered. If the Quaid's family had a strength that the other families could not contend against, he would definitely attack the other families around him. If he was in their shoes, he could not help but worry that Grey would attack the Quaid's family. Since they were not opponents, the only thing he could do was to show his friendliness. He would give up some benefits and establish a friendly relationship with the other party. This way, even if the other party wanted to attack the other families, he would not choose to attack the family he was in. Just as Serad Quates made his decision, similar scenes were happening in the other families. It could be said that this time, the other families were quite shocked. They originally thought that the other party was only slightly stronger than them, but they were shocked to find that the other party was not on the same level as them. Chapter 648. Raleigh City, Raleigh Family Mansion. After taking control of the Raleigh family, Grey lived here, and Kesha was also brought over. Although Raleigh City was not located next to the Forbidden Forest like Manuel City, it was not too far away from the Forbidden Forest. If one flew, 1 or 2 hours would be enough to reach it, and if one used spatial teleportation, it would not take much time. When one wanted to hunt blood beasts, one could immediately enter the Forbidden Forest. Sir Grey, welcome to Viken City as a guest when you have time. A noble woman wearing a long dress with golden gems and exuding a noble temperament bowed slightly to Grey before taking her leave. She was the patriarch of the Viken family, and the Viken family was a big family that was not weaker than the Raleigh family before their strength was weakened. They were the masters of Viken City. Since Grey showed the disaster-level beast and subdued the Raleigh family, many families came to visit one after another. Although most of the visitors were received by the Raleigh family, there were a small number of visitors that Grey had to receive personally because of their noble status. The other party was one of them. It took Grey a lot of effort, but the benefits he gained were also not small. Every family that came to visit naturally brought gifts, especially the people sent by the big families. The gifts were more valuable than the previous, and there were all kinds of precious magic herbs and magic potions. Sir Grey, everything is ready. We can set off at any time. Seeing that Grey had sent away the guests, Aubrey appeared and respectfully said to Grey, "Well, let's go then." Grey nodded and walked out. He was going to explore the ghost territory that the Raleigh family had discovered. Since learning of such a place, he had planned to explore it. A place like the ghost territory was very extreme, and extreme environments were easy to produce extreme things. It was precisely because of this reason that the Raleigh family collected the blood essence of the magic ghost fox to refine the ghost potion and wanted to explore the ghost territory. The ghost fox's blood essence had already been consumed by Gray, so it was naturally impossible for him to refine the ghost potion. However, with the ghost fox's bloodline and the ability of ghosts, Gray was naturally not afraid of ghosts. A carriage drove out of Raleigh City. It didn't have the Raleigh clan's emblem, and it didn't look too luxurious from the outside. No one would have thought that the Raleigh clan's patriarch and Gray were sitting inside. The news of the spirit domain being discovered in the vicinity of Luo-Lai City was tightly sealed by the Luo-Lai family. The other families did not know about it. To prevent the news from leaking out, the two of them left Luo-Lai City in a very low-key manner. The carriage traveled for a few hours. They arrived at a mine that looked like it had been reclaimed. The mine had stopped mining because the spirit zone had been discovered, but many people were stationed there. There were even a few kings there. There should have been a magic light stationed here, but he died at the hands of Gray in Manuel City. Gray and Aubrey went through the deep, winding tunnels of the mine. After 1,000 meters, a cave appeared in front of them. The cave was around 10 meters in diameter. It was covered in a gray fog. They could vaguely see a white light floating through the fog. Gray, who had dealt with spirits many times, could naturally tell at a glance that it was the light emitted from a spirit's body. Let's go. Activating his specter ability, he created a soul barrier that could repel specters, enveloping him and Aubrey. Gray stepped inside. Gray stepped out and saw the scene inside the spirit domain. This was an empty underground world. It was filled with gray fog, and visibility was very low. Even with Gray's vision, he could only see a few dozen meters away. But it was this distance of a few dozen meters that made Gray's hair stand on end. There were a large number of specters, densely packed specters. Conservatively speaking, there were at least 100 specters within this range of a few dozen meters. Just at the entrance, there were already so many spirits. One could only imagine how many spirits there were in the entire spirit territory. It was no wonder that when the Luo-Lai clan discovered this ghost territory, they didn't send out experts with fire or lightning abilities to exterminate it. Instead, they concocted ghost medicine. There were simply too many ghosts, and it was impossible to kill all of them. Gray and Aubrey walked forward. The soul waves produced by the ghost powers could not only enslave ghosts, but they could also drive them away. The ghosts in front of them all avoided them like snakes and scorpions. How many people died back then? After walking for half an hour, all they saw were human-shaped ghosts. They were as densely packed as ants in an ant nest. Gray could not help but be shocked by their numbers. Every human-shaped spirit represented a person who had once been alive. With so many spirits, how many people had died? 1 million? 10 million? He still didn't know how vast the spirit domain was. There was no way to estimate it, but he was sure that the number was definitely exaggerated. Back then, an extremely terrifying battle must have taken place here, and there must have been law realm powerhouses among the two parties involved. This underground space might have been a law realm powerhouse who had used his Earth-type ability to change the world, dragging the world that was originally on the surface into the ground. In front, a small stone emitting a white light attracted Gray's attention. Gray walked over and picked it up. The pebble was about the size of a finger. Its shape was irregular and uneven. It was no different from an ordinary rock. The only difference was that it was emitting a white light, which was very similar to the light on Spectre's body. Lord Gray, this is a soul stone. It's a precious material that can only be produced in places with extremely dense ghosts. It's a material for refining some special magic potions. It's extremely valuable. Aubrey introduced it to Gray. Extremely valuable? How valuable is it? Gray had come into contact with many ghosts, but it was the first time he had seen a soul stone. This could not help but arouse his interest. A place with dense ghosts could actually produce such a thing. He looked at Aubrey curiously and asked, "For example, the soul stone in your hand. If you sell it, it should be able to sell for about $1 million. Aubrey carefully looked at the size of the soul stone in Gray's hand and estimated. $1 million. Gray was faintly shocked. A finger-sized thing could actually be sold for $1 million magic power coins. It could be called a sky-high price. He finally understood why the Raleigh family had bid for and snatched the blood essence of the spectral fox at all costs. In just half an hour, they had a harvest of $1 million magic power coins, and this was obviously not their only gain in this ghost territory. If they explored the entire ghost territory, how amazing would their harvest be? It was not difficult to understand why the Raleigh family would snatch the blood essence of the spectral fox at all costs. The two continued to search, and after a few hours, the two of them had harvested a total of 7 soul stones. Although the probability of a soul stone being born was extremely low, this was the ghost territory. Moreover, it was a ghost territory that no one had ever reached. As the first batch to arrive, their harvest was naturally the greatest. "Lord Gray, there's a plant over there." Aubrey suddenly pointed to the left and said. Although Gray definitely surpassed Aubrey in terms of battle prowess, Gray's eyesight was inferior to Aubrey's by a large margin. After all, he was only at the 3rd layer of the Monarch realm, while Aubrey was already at the Magic Light realm. A plant that could survive in this ghost territory was naturally not an ordinary plant. The two of them walked in that direction, and after walking for about 100 meters, a plant that was dozens of centimeters tall appeared in front of them. This was a plant that emitted a faint red light. The plant's roots were straight, and its leaves were slightly red, like crescent moons. It grew evenly along the roots, and the faint red light on the plant's surface was emitted by these leaves. "Lord Gray, this is blood moon grass, the main ingredient of the blood moon potion, which is of a higher grade than the blood dragon potion," Aubrey said excitedly. "The main ingredient of the blood moon potion?" Hearing Aubrey's introduction, Gray's eyes couldn't help but shine with excitement. He had once read about the blood moon potion in a book. It was a precious potion that had the same effect as the blood dragon potion, but it was more than 10 times stronger than the blood dragon potion. Gray had experienced the effects of the blood dragon potion. After taking it twice in a row, his strength had greatly increased, especially the first time, which had allowed him to advance by an entire realm. The blood moon potion was more than 10 times more potent than the blood dragon potion. So, just how potent would its effects be? How much of a boost would one get after taking it? The only regret was that the blood dragon potion was too potent. If one took it under the magic light realm, they would have to dilute it and take it several times. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand the effects of the potion and their body would collapse. "Are you confident in refining the blood moon potion?" Gray looked expectantly at Aubrey and asked. "I am. Although I haven't refined the blood moon potion before, I've refined potions of the same grade. I'm confident in refining it," Aubrey said with some confidence. Aubrey said confidently. As a master in the field of alchemy, he was naturally very confident in his field of expertise. "Very good." Gray nodded in satisfaction. He felt more and more that taking up a resurrection spot to revive Aubrey was not a loss. Aubrey crouched down and carefully dug at the surrounding soil. Gray didn't move. The grayish-white color of the soil clearly indicated that it wasn't normal soil. And this was the truth. This place had existed for far too long. The flesh of the dead had disappeared, leaving behind only bones, and then the bones had turned to ash. This grayish-white soil was not soil but bone ash. Although Gray wasn't afraid of this sort of thing, he didn't want to touch it if he could. Ding! Aubrey's hand came into contact with something hard. It was like he had struck metal, emitting a crisp sound. Gray looked over and saw that it was a jade-like bone. Judging from its shape and size, it was probably a human arm bone. Chapter 649. A human skeleton that has not turned to dust. Gray was surprised. This was the first time he had seen a skeleton that had not turned to dust since he had entered the spirit zone. He looked closer. As Aubrey cleared the area around the blood moon grass, many bones began to appear. Skull, ribs, hand bones, spine, thigh bones, calf bones, foot bones. A complete skeleton appeared in front of Gray. There was no longer any pressure. He did not know if it had been gone for a long time or if it had disappeared for some other reason. The skeleton's entire body was jade-like. It was different from the jade-like appearance of ordinary king-class elites. The jade-like surface of the skeleton was turning silver. Can you tell how strong this person was when he was alive? It was the first time Gray had seen a skeleton that had turned silver. Gray could not help but ask Aubrey. It should be an Annihilation class elite. It should be an Annihilation class elite that was only one step away from Rule class. Aubrey looked at the skeleton. His face was full of shock. I have heard that Rule class elite skeletons are silver. It is like they are made of silver metal. This person's skeleton has turned silver. He must have been in the process of reaching Rule class. An Annihilation class elite that was only one step away from Rule class. Hearing Aubrey's words, Gray's face was full of shock. Annihilation class was a terrifying existence. Even in the original world, where elites were everywhere, they were considered top-class elites. Because of that, he had been able to use the body of a disaster-class blood beast, which was the same level as the Destruction Warrior. He had been able to suppress the families around the area and make them unable to fight him. They had all come to him to curry favor. He was standing at the top of Annihilation class. He was only one step away from becoming Demon Light. How strong would he be? Yet, even such a powerful existence had died here. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the battle that had erupted here back then was. Looking away from the skeleton, Gray looked at the Blood Moon grass. The Blood Moon grass was their reward. As for the skeleton, although the skeleton of a human powerhouse could be used as a material for a magic weapon, just like the skeleton of a powerful blood fiend, he had no intention of doing so. Furthermore, if the self-proclaimed righteous holy temples were to find out about this kind of magical weapon made from corpses, they would be hunted down crazily. Although Gray did not think that using corpses to make magical weapons was evil, just like how using the corpses of his enemies as weapons was evil, he did not want to try it out. Could it be that this Blood Moon grass grew from the corpse of this expert? Looking at the Blood Moon grass, Gray fell into deep thought. The roots of the Blood Moon grass had taken root in the body of the skeleton, which made him wonder if it was the skeleton of this expert that had given birth to the Blood Moon grass. It was because of this expert skeleton that the Blood Moon grass could grow. That should be the case. I've heard that the Blood Moon grass grows on corpses. Now it seems like it's true. Aubrey nodded, affirming Gray's judgment. The Blood Moon grass could only appear because of this expert skeleton. Even if a powerhouse died, the flesh and blood essence of their body would be an excellent tonic for other creatures. The Blood Moon grass had clearly absorbed this flesh and blood essence to grow. A cycle. Thinking about the relationship between the Blood Moon grass and the expert skeleton, Gray could not help but sigh. There was a mysterious relationship between things. For this unknown powerhouse to grow to such a level, he must have consumed many magic potions refined from magic herbs when he was alive. After his death, his body grew more and more magic herbs. The magic herbs nourished this powerhouse, and the essence of this powerhouse's flesh and blood after his death nourished the magic herbs. A complete cycle of reincarnation was formed between the two. Reincarnation is the simplest and most unsolvable law. I wonder if there are any law powerhouses who can break this law. At the thought of reincarnation, Gray could not help but think of rule-level powerhouses because they were the people who had lived the longest and were the people who were most likely to break this law. While rule-level abilities gave them powerful abilities, they also gave them all kinds of strange methods. Perhaps some of them could rely on this method to escape the restrictions of the reincarnation law and have infinite life. Therefore, Gray believed that rule-level powerhouses were the people who were most likely to break the reincarnation law. Of course, these were all Gray's guesses. He did not dare to come to a conclusion about whether such rule-level powerhouses existed. His understanding of rule-level powerhouses was too little. Without reaching a certain level, he would not be able to understand what kind of realm they were. So he naturally could not determine whether people who broke the reincarnation law really existed. After carefully plucking the Blood Moon grass, Gray and Aubrey left, preparing to begin a new exploration. This ghost territory was a treasure land. A conservative estimate was that their current harvest was more than 10 million magic power coins, and this was only their harvest in a few hours. If they completely explored this ghost territory in a few days, what kind of harvest would they have? This was an undiscovered treasure land, waiting for them to unearth the treasures inside. The two of them did not want to waste a moment. Suddenly, a sharp piercing sound was heard. The sound was extremely sharp and ear-piercing, causing Gray and Aubrey's eardrums to hurt and goosebumps to appear on their bodies. Something hit the invisible soul barrier that Gray had propped up with his ghost ability, causing Gray's soul to feel as if it had been hit by an invisible hammer. He felt dizzy, and as his soul felt dizzy, his body staggered. What's that? After stabilizing his body, Gray's expression changed drastically. The invisible soul barrier had almost been shattered. If it had been shattered, the outcome could be imagined. Although he had the ghost ability and could restrain and control ghosts, it did not mean that ghosts could not harm him. If the soul barrier was shattered, the surrounding ghosts would swarm over. If they could not escape in time or re-erect the soul barrier, what awaited him and Aubrey was certain to be death. He and Aubrey couldn't help but look in the direction of the collision. Suddenly, they saw that not far away from them, a ghost that was different from the other ghosts appeared. The light on the specter was obviously brighter than the other specters. It was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Moreover, they could vaguely see a face on the specter. This was the first time they had seen a specter whose face could even be distinguished. The previous ghosts' faces were blurry, and they could not distinguish who was who. But the ghost in front of them, although its face was slightly blurry, they could vaguely recognize it. It was completely different from the other ghosts. And this was not the only difference between this ghost and the other ghosts. Gray Soul Barrier had the effect of repelling ghosts. The other ghosts would avoid it from afar, but this ghost in front of them not only did not avoid it, but also attacked the Soul Barrier. Schwa! It was unable to break Gray's Soul Barrier. The ghost hit it again. Use a fire demon weapon to attack. Gray ordered Aubrey. Aubrey quickly took out a fire element knife demon weapon. A condensed blue flame attacked the ghost that was coming toward them. TZZT. TZZT. The blue flames spread all the way forward. Many spirits couldn't dodge in time and were burned to ashes by the blue flames. However, this particular spirit didn't become one of the many spirits that were burned to ashes. The ghost's body quickly moved sideways to avoid the attack. It hit Gray's soul barrier from the other side. The ghost power soul barrier was hit again. Gray's soul was like it had been hit by an invisible hammer. His soul was in pain. His body staggered. That is fast. This ghost must have been an Annihilation class elite when it was alive. It is not just an ordinary Annihilation class elite. Cold sweat appeared on Gray's forehead. His face looked glum. The speed this specter displayed in an instant was extremely fast, to the point where Gray and Ubrin's eyes couldn't even catch it. It was even faster than Maruna, who had been accelerated by the law of time. Maruna's speed, with the time rule power, was faster than an ordinary Annihilation class elite, but the ghost's speed was faster than Maruna's. One could only imagine how powerful it had been when it was alive. This ghost is probably the soul of this skeleton elite after it died. Aubrey looked at the skeleton that was not too far away from them and voiced his guess. The reason he came to that conclusion was because the power matched. The skeleton was left behind by an elite that was only one step away from rule class. The spirit was not only an Annihilation class elite when it was alive, but it was also not an ordinary Annihilation class elite. That was why he could match it. Judging by the height of the skeleton, the height of the ghost was very close to the height of the ghost. The ghost had appeared around the skeleton, and its height was very close. It was not a coincidence. Another attack hit Gray's soul shield. Another wave of pain came from Gray's soul. Waves of tiredness came from Gray's soul. That was the result of using up a lot of his soul power. Every hit cost a lot of his soul power. Gray's soul power was quickly being drained. I cannot block it. I can only block it a few more times. Then, my soul shield will break. I have to go. The ghost in front of them was beyond what they could deal with. It was not something they could deal with. Gray made a quick decision. He was going to use space teleportation to leave. At this time, just as Gray was going to use space teleportation, something weird happened. After entering Gray's body, the gold sword, which he had not used before, appeared in Gray's hand. There was a strange wave that spread out. Chapter 650. What's going on? Gray's expression changed. It was a crucial moment for him to escape, but the golden sword suddenly appeared. This was not a good sign. If it could affect the space teleportation, the consequences would be unimaginable. Grabbing onto Aubrey's shoulder, he immediately activated the space teleportation. But the next moment, his expression turned ugly. The space teleportation that he had relied on so many times to escape had failed. He looked at the golden sword that was still vibrating in his hand. He did not need to think to know that it was this golden sword that caused the space teleportation to fail. Puff! Gritting his teeth, Gray immediately threw the golden sword out. It pierced into the ground tens of meters away. Although the golden sword was extremely powerful, compared to saving his life, it was obvious what to choose. Plus, the golden sword was still in this spirit hell. When he was strong enough, he could definitely defeat the spirit and take the golden sword back. After throwing the golden sword, Gray immediately prepared to use the space teleportation to escape. But just as he was about to activate the space teleportation, he could not help but stop and look at the direction of the golden sword. After being thrown away by Gray, the golden sword was still vibrating. Following the vibration of the golden sword, a strange change occurred. A golden whirlpool appeared with the golden sword as the center. As the whirlpool appeared, a terrifying suction force appeared. Under the terrifying suction force, spirits could not help but float towards the golden sword. They were sucked into the golden whirlpool and disappeared. Screech! That special spirit screamed in fear. It was not only the other spirits that were attracted, but it was also attracted. Even with its unimaginable speed, it could not escape from the suction force. It was being sucked into the golden whirlpool, absorbing spirits. I understand now. Seeing this, Gray's eyes lit up. He understood. When the sword was being repaired, it had absorbed many spirits. It was obvious that the sword could absorb spirits. But in this environment with so many spirits, especially that special spirit's dense spirit aura, it stimulated the sword and stimulated the sword's ability to absorb spirits. After understanding this, Gray was not in a hurry to escape. Perhaps this spirit hell would be more beneficial to him than he thought. Because the final blood sacrifice was not done, the golden sword was not completely repaired. But now, the changes meant that the golden sword could still be repaired. It might even be able to repair the golden sword further. In the end, the special specter was sucked into the golden vortex. Not only the special specter, but all the specters within a radius of several hundred meters were sucked into the vortex as well. The specter territory, which was full of specters, was now empty of specters. A crisis had been resolved in a strange way. The golden sword that Gray thought would not be of much use in a short period of time actually had such an ability. For Gray, this was unexpected, but definitely something to be happy about. With the gold sword's ability to devour spirits, he would be much safer in this spirit territory. Gray walked over and picked up the golden sword. He held it in his hand and looked at it. It had absorbed many spirits, and one of them was a spirit that was close to the soul of a rule-class being. The golden sword did not change much. It was still golden as if it was made of gold. They continued on their journey. Gray held the golden sword in his hand. In the beginning, he would put up a soul barrier, but later, he simply removed the soul barrier. Any spirit that appeared within hundreds of meters of him would be devoured by the golden sword. It was impossible for them to get close to him and Aubrey. A giant metal ship. In front of them, the wreckage of a metal ship appeared in front of Gray and Aubrey. Gray and Aubrey walked over and approached the metal ship. It was an extremely large metal ship, covered in gray mist. Gray and Aubrey could not see the end of the metal ship even if they looked as far as they could. Conservatively speaking, the ship was at least hundreds of meters long. The surface of the metal ship was rusty and severely damaged. It was almost riddled with holes. Broken rune patterns could be vaguely seen on the surface. This should be a rune ship, Gray concluded. According to what he knew, there was a type of transportation tool called a rune ship in the source world. This type of rune ship did not sail on water, but flew in the sky. The floating runes drove it, giving it the ability to fly in the sky. Furthermore, it was extremely fast. It was a necessary means of transportation for long-distance travel in the Source World. Furthermore, he knew that a rune ship to Chaos City would pass by this area near the Forbidden Forest every month. Anyone could pay a fee to board it. Of course, the ticket was also very expensive. The most ordinary ticket cost 10,000 magic power coins. After all, Gray had only spent over 10,000 magic coins to purchase a residence in Manuel City, and the cost of a ship ticket was almost the same. One could imagine how expensive such a ship ticket was. It is indeed a rune ship, and it should be the best rune ship. It must be a rune ship owned by a certain holy temple, Aubrey said with a nod. An ordinary rune ship was about a few dozen meters long, while a slightly larger one was about 100 meters long. As for a rune ship that was 400 to 500 meters long, it could definitely be called a giant rune ship. Only the temple had the ability to create and control such a rune ship. Although such a giant runic ship could no longer be repaired, it clearly had great exploration value. Gray and Aubrey entered the giant runic ship through a hole in the ship. The interior of the giant rune ship was divided into several levels, and each level had many rooms. Gray and Aubrey entered one room after another and searched every room. They did not miss a single spot. Unfortunately, too much time had passed, and the things that originally existed had all decayed. Even the traces of their existence had disappeared. Hence, all they saw were empty rooms. They did not find anything after searching this level. Through the rusty stairs that looked like they would collapse at any time, the two of them went up to the next level and continued their search. A spear. In one of the rooms, the two of them finally made a discovery. They saw a blue spear. Gray picked it up and saw that the originally dark blue spear was now covered in rust. There were even traces of corrosion, as if it had been bitten by insects. Gotcha! Gray exerted some strength with both hands, and the spear was easily broken by him. Originally, this should have been an extremely high-grade magic weapon made of extremely precious materials. Unfortunately, under the ravages of time, the magic weapon had been damaged, and even the originally sturdy material had become brittle. As they continued their search, they found a few more magic weapons. They were all like the previous spear, and their material had become extremely brittle. They could be broken with a light bend. Finally, the two of them searched to the top level, which was also the last level. If they did not find anything on this level, they would have to leave the ship with nothing. A book. They entered one room after another, but they were all empty. Just as they reflexively entered a room and prepared to leave, they could not help but stop. This was a room that was slightly larger than the other rooms. Moreover, this room was not empty. Although it was extremely decayed, the vague outlines of the items in the room could still be seen. There was a wooden bed, a wooden table, a wardrobe. This should be a bedroom, and it should be the bedroom of a person of high status. At this moment, on a wooden table that was so rotten that it could collapse at any time, they actually saw a book that did not seem to be damaged. The book looked a little huge, at least several times the size of an ordinary book. It was silver in color and was not bound with ordinary thread, but with many metal rings. The two of them walked over and came closer and found that the book was not made of paper or leather, but seemed to be polished with an extremely hard material. It was no wonder that it was bound with metal rings. If it was bound with thread, it would not be flipped at all. There were words on the front of the book, and, fortunately, they could recognize the words. When they saw the words on the book, they could not help but be stunned, and their eyes suddenly widened. Spatial law. When the words on the book were combined, they meant spatial law. This was a book related to spatial law. Laws had always been synonymous with power and mystery. Law-level powerhouses stood at the top of the source world. From this, it was not difficult to see the high value of anything related to laws. No matter what this book recorded about spatial law, it would definitely be extremely valuable. Gray could not wait to reach out and flip through the pages. So heavy. However, he could not help but be slightly surprised. The weight of the pages was beyond his imagination. Just one page was probably several kilograms, and it was denser than most metals. These are bones. These are pages polished from bones. Gray carefully looked at the pages and was immediately shocked to find that the pages had the same texture as bones. The pages were actually polished from the bones of some kind of blood beast. Silver texture. This is polished from the bone fragments of a rule-level blood beast. The bones of powerhouses that were close to the level of laws were only slightly silver in texture, showing signs of transforming into silver. However, the bone piece that was polished into this book was completely silver. The answer was obvious. This was polished from the bone piece of a blood beast that was comparable to a law powerhouse. No wonder it was undamaged when everything else had decayed. It could even preserve the bones of a rule-level powerhouse, let alone a book made from the bones of a rule-level blood beast. Chapter 651. It's a book made from the bones of a rule-class blood fiend. Gray felt that the value of the book was extraordinary. The book must have recorded something very valuable. Because it was afraid of damage, it was made from the bones of a rule-class blood fiend. Plus, if a faction could make a book with the bones of a rule-class blood fiend, the content would not be ordinary. Gray flipped to the first page and looked at its contents. He read it carefully. This page was equivalent to a general outline of a book. It gave a general introduction to rule-bending abilities and how to obtain them. According to the introduction, every rule class ability was a mixture of 5 basic abilities. Different combinations of abilities would form different rules. Even if there was only one difference between 2 abilities, the resulting rule class ability could be very different. At the same time, it was impossible for 2 rule class abilities to appear in the same person at the same time. It was only possible to have one of the 2 rule class abilities. The way to obtain rule power was not by directly implanting a rule power bloodline. You had to first implant a mixed bloodline. When your body was strong enough, usually when you reach Annihilation class, you would then implant the missing element or a few elements. In the end, you would get rule power. During this process, due to the mutual rejection of the bloodline, it was very likely to be dangerous when the second bloodline was implanted. It could cause the person to go crazy or lose all their power. Even if there was a corresponding magic potion to help reduce the body's rejection of the original bloodline, there was still a high chance of danger. The reason such a dangerous step was that no first-time cultivator could withstand a rule-class bloodline. Rule-class bloodline only existed in the bodies of rule-class blood fiends. Blood fiends below rule-class did not have rule-class bloodline. For a first-time cultivator, it was obvious that they could not withstand a rule-class bloodline. That was why they had to indirectly obtain rule-class bloodline through multiple implantations. Although the multiple implantation method was very risky due to the rejection of the bloodline, it was obviously not as dangerous as directly implanting a rule-class bloodline. If the multiple implantation method was to say that there was a way to survive, then directly implanting a rule-class bloodline was basically suicide. Furthermore, it was not necessarily dangerous to implant a bloodline multiple times. If the implanted person had an affinity body, the second implantation could be reserved as an affinity body bloodline. That way, the danger of the bloodline rejecting the bloodline could be avoided. Precisely because of this reason, the compatible physique was practically the darling of all the great temples. As long as one possessed an compatible physique, as long as their cultivation talent was not too bad, they would be heavily nurtured by the various temples. The Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple must have an affinity physique. Gray could not help but think of the Holy Maiden of the Radiant St. Hall. She was only at the level of magic light, but she already possessed the power of laws. Clearly, she had implanted a second bloodline beforehand. The reason why he dared to implant the second bloodline in advance was definitely because the other party had an affinity with a certain or even a few abilities, so the bloodline would not reject the second bloodline. After reading the contents of the first page, Gray flipped to the second page, which was an introduction to the spatial rule ability. It described the 5 types of abilities that the spatial rule was formed from and recorded the special abilities derived from the spatial rule ability that he had seen so far. There is the ability to teleport without the help of anything, allowing one to instantly appear in a place one had been before. The distance one could teleport to with this ability was generally related to one's realm. The higher one's realm was the further one could teleport. There was the special ability to open up space, obtain a portable space, or open up a fixed space in a certain place. It mentioned that a certain expert who had grasped the spatial rule had even used this special ability to open up a plane. There was the special ability to create a shadow space. Everything in a shadow space was a shadow of the outside world. The creator of the shadow space could change between illusion and reality at any time. He could attack the enemy, but the enemy could not attack him. There was the special ability to create a spatial barrier. This ability could create an invisible but real spatial barrier. It had extremely powerful defensive power. Not only could it be used to protect oneself, but it could also be used to trap the enemy or even directly crush the enemy into mincemeat. There were many special abilities derived from the spatial rule ability. Everyone who possessed the spatial rule ability would randomly obtain several of these special abilities. Moreover, these abilities recorded in the book were not all. It was very likely that there were special abilities that had yet to appear. Thunder type, metal type, water type, shadow type, earth type. The spatial rule ability is actually a combination of these 5 elements. Gray looked at the 5 type abilities that formed the spatial rule ability. His eyes instantly burned with excitement, and he could even be described as ecstatic. When he found out that the 2 rules that formed the same ability could not coexist, he was a little worried that the spatial rule ability would have the same ability composition as his existing time rule ability and could not coexist. However, when he saw that the spatial rule ability was actually a combination of lightning type, metal type, water type, shadow type, and earth type abilities, he was completely relieved. The 5 elemental abilities that formed the time rule ability were ice type, fire type, wind type, wood type, and poison type. They did not conflict with the spatial rule ability at all. My original idea was right. Among the 10 elemental abilities, the other 5 elemental abilities can also form rule abilities, and they're spatial rule abilities. Previously, Gray had thought about mixing lightning type, metal type, water type, shadow type, and earth type abilities to see if he could mix them into a new rule ability. Now, it was confirmed that these 5 elemental abilities could indeed be mixed into a rule ability, and it was the spatial rule ability. Gray continued to flip through the pages at the back. He browsed through page after page. After reading for more than an hour, he roughly scanned the contents of the entire book. The contents at the back recorded 5 hybrid blood techniques. These 5 hybrid blood techniques were all 4-type hybrid blood techniques that were only 1 step away from the rule ability. There were also detailed records of which blood beast bloodline had a higher success rate for the second blood implantation, as well as the corresponding formula of the magic potion to suppress the bloodline. Obviously, this was a blood technique book for cultivating the rule ability. The ultimate goal was to let the cultivator master the rule ability and become the owner of the rule ability. The 5 hybrid blood techniques are all extremely valuable hybrid blood techniques. The possibility of obtaining the rule ability through cultivation is very high, but these 5 methods are useless to me. Gray shook his head slightly. Compared to the contents at the front, the latter contents were not of much help to him. Not to mention that it was impossible for him to implant a bloodline from the beginning. Even if he could, he would not do so. With the ability to transform, he had an easier way to obtain the rule ability. As long as he knew which 5 elemental abilities made up the spatial rule ability, he was confident that he could mix them into the spatial rule ability. If I can obtain the blood of a blood beast with a spatial rule ability bloodline, I will be able to obtain the spatial rule ability in one go, but the possibility is not high. A blood beast with a spatial rule ability bloodline would definitely be a rule ability bloodline. The value of such a blood beast blood would naturally be extremely high. The major temples that had the ability to hunt would definitely not let such blood flow out, so it was almost impossible to obtain the blood of a blood beast with a spatial rule ability. I can only choose to mix multiple bloodlines. Since there was no way to directly implant a spatial rule ability bloodline, he could only mix it into a spatial rule ability in the form of a mixture. He would then consume various bloodlines to transform and finally fuse them into a spatial rule ability. My Earth bloodline is already at the magic light level. I am still missing the water, lightning, metal, and shadow bloodlines. I am not far from the magic light level now. It would be best if they were all calamity level bloodlines. It would be best if I can find the blood of a calamity level blood beast with a mixture of these for bloodlines. If I can't find it, I can only settle for the next best thing, which is to mix it twice. If it's two mixtures, then I already have a mixed bloodline of water and thunder. The disaster level blood fiend I fought in the Forbidden Forest is one of them. I've also collected its blood, so I'm only missing a mixed bloodline of metal and shadow. With a plan in mind, Gray put away the spatial rule bloodline book and left the ship with Aubrey. In terms of value, this book could be said to be priceless. Even the Holy Sanctum would be moved by it. It could no longer be measured in magic coins. If some powerful organization with a destruction warrior in charge obtained this book, it would not be impossible for them to become a Holy Sanctum organization in a few years' time. Many organizations that were only slightly weaker than the Holy Sanctum already had a sufficient foundation. What they lacked was such a top-notch bloodline book. As long as they had it, the possibility of producing a rule-ability powerhouse would increase by several times. Gray naturally did not plan to sell such a book. Although he had no use for it, he could leave it for the descendants of the Fergus family. Perhaps in a few years' time, the Fergus family would develop into a holy clan. Half a month later, Gray and Aubrey ended their search of the ghost territory. In half a month, they had roughly circled the ghost territory. Most of the ghosts had been devoured by the gold sword. Their harvest was also great. They had obtained over 40 soul stones and 5 blood moon grass. Other than that, they had also obtained some other magic herbs and precious ores. There were bound to be precious items that they had not discovered in the ghost territory, but they did not plan to search for them. There were not many ghosts left in the ghost territory, and those that were left were no longer a threat. They could send a group of people from the Raleigh family to search for them. There was no need for them to search for them personally. This was the benefit of being in charge of an organization. There were many things that could be done on behalf of others, saving a lot of time. Moreover, the various supplementary ingredients for the Blood Moon Potion had been collected. They could begin refining it, and Gray could not wait. Chapter 652. A month later. This is the Blood Moon Potion. Gray looked excitedly at the 5 potions in front of him. Contained in a transparent crystal bottle, the liquid was as red as blood. From afar, it looked like a scarlet gem. Shaking it slightly, one could clearly feel that this liquid was slightly viscous and had a viscous texture, just like syrup. "Yes, my lord," Aubrey also said excitedly. Even as an apothecary master, facing a level 4 potion like the Blood Moon Potion, which he had never refined before, he still felt pressured. He had originally thought that he would fail at least once, but he had not expected to succeed on his first try. Succeeding on his first try really made him overjoyed. If nothing unexpected happened, his apothecary level should have improved, or else it would not have gone so smoothly. Good, very good. Gray nodded in satisfaction. The Blood Moon Potion's efficacy was more than 10 times that of the Blood Dragon Potion, and Gray had a deep understanding of the Blood Dragon Potion's efficacy. After taking it twice, he had greatly improved. One could only imagine how powerful the Blood Moon Potion, whose efficacy was more than 10 times that of the Blood Dragon Potion, would be. And this was not the only thing that made him happy. After interacting with Apothecary Master Aubrey, Gray's understanding of apothecaries was much greater than before. He naturally understood what it meant to be able to successfully refine a level 4 potion on his first try. This was the embodiment of a powerful apothecary level. Even among apothecary masters, Aubrey's apothecary level was definitely extremely high. This made him overjoyed. Putting everything else aside, Aubrey's apothecary skills alone were worth more than the 5th tier of Magic Light. He was completely worthy of a resurrection quota. What he did not know was that Aubrey's talent in cultivation was ordinary. The reason he could become a Magic Light warrior and the patriarch of the Raleigh family was entirely due to his talent in apothecary. After some consideration, Gray put away 3 of the Blood Moon potions, leaving 2 behind. One of them is for you. Dilute the other into a concentration suitable for me. After some consideration, He gave one of the 5 potions to Aubrey. With his absolute control over the resurrection ability, even if Gray did not give him a single potion, the other party would not dare to have the slightest complaint. However, Gray did not intend to do so. Such a powerful alchemy grandmaster naturally had to be nurtured well so that he could continue to shine. Spending some money to raise his realm and live longer was obviously a very cost-effective transaction. The matter of the Blood Moon potion came to an end. Gray looked at Aubrey and began to ask about another matter that he was rather concerned about. How's the search for the disaster-level blood fiends with hybrid abilities coming along? After confirming the composition of the Space Rule ability, Gray ordered the Luo Lai family to send a team into the depths of the Forbidden Forest to search for disaster-level blood fiends with mixed abilities. Although it was impossible for him to kill a disaster-level blood fiend with his current strength, it was still possible for him to injure it and make it bleed a little. Therefore, Gray ordered the Luo Lai family to send a team into the depths of the Forbidden Forest to search. My lord, the situation is not ideal. Not only were we unable to find the disaster-level blood fiends with gold and shadow abilities that you need, but we have also lost 3 search teams. The Forbidden Forest is too dangerous, Aubrey said solemnly as he restrained the excitement on his face. We have already lost 3 search teams? Gray frowned slightly. It seemed that the Forbidden Forest was too difficult for these king-level search teams. Relying on them to find suitable disaster-level blood fiends was too much. Stop the search and call back the search teams. Knowing that it was useless to continue the search, and that it would only cause more losses, Gray could only stop the search. If relying on the Luo Lai family search team is not feasible, then I can only search in the Forbidden Forest personally. However, even if I search in the Forbidden Forest personally, I may not be able to find a suitable blood fiend by myself. Gray subconsciously held his chin with his right hand as he thought of a solution. After a long time, he looked up and asked Aubrey, "Do you know where I can buy the hybrid ability disaster-level blood fiend's blood that I need?" Even if he was willing to take the risk and enter the Forbidden Forest to search, he may not be able to find a suitable disaster-level blood fiend. Thus, hunting for blood was almost impossible. He could only see if there was another way. It should be possible in Chaos City, Aubrey thought for a moment before replying. The disaster-level bloodline that he had implanted in his body was purchased in Chaos City at a huge cost. Chaos City, huh? That is indeed possible. A contemplative look appeared in Gray's eyes. Chaos City was the headquarters of the Chaos Holy Palace, and the most prosperous place in the entire anarchic territory. There were many large trade unions and auction houses there, so it was indeed possible that he could find the hybrid ability disaster-level blood fiend's blood there. Looks like I have to make a trip to Chaos City when I have time. Gray made up his mind. In order to obtain the spatial power, he had to make a trip to Chaos City. Of course, he was also prepared for the worst. If he still couldn't find a suitable hybrid ability disaster-level blood fiend's blood in Chaos City, what should he do next? His plan was that if it really came to that, he would only be able to purchase the blood of a single elemental disaster-level blood fiend. If he couldn't even purchase a single elemental disaster-level blood fiend's blood, then he would have to hunt for blood in the Forbidden Forest. In the Forbidden Forest, there were actually quite a few disaster-level blood fiends. What was rare was the hybrid ability disaster-level blood fiend. It was just like how there were very few humans who could cultivate hybrid blood techniques and were able to do so. He could hunt for the blood of a single elemental disaster-level blood fiend, and then use the single elemental disaster-level blood fiend's spatial power. Of course, in this way, he would need to undergo a lot more transformations. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to use this method. Not long after, the diluted Blood Moon potion was delivered to Gray. The blood-red color had faded slightly, and the potion was weakened by several times. However, it was now a potion that even a king-tier Gray could take. I can't take it yet. I have to wait for another 2 months. Gray resisted the urge to take the potion immediately. He put the 3 diluted Blood Moon potion away. He didn't take it immediately. Different types of supplementary cultivation medicine had different intervals between each use. Generally speaking, the more effective the supplementary cultivation medicine was, the longer the interval between each use would be after it was consumed. If he took auxiliary cultivation potions too frequently, his body wouldn't be able to withstand the effects of the auxiliary cultivation potion and would be damaged. This kind of damage could even cause his cultivation level to drop. According to what Gray had heard from Aubrey, auxiliary cultivation potions like the Blood Dragon potion had to be taken at least 3 months apart. That was the only way it wouldn't cause any damage to his body. The last time he took the Blood Dragon potion was only a month ago, so he had to wait another 2 months before he could take the Blood Moon potion again. The Leopold family was a family tens of thousands of miles away from Roulette City. It was a very powerful family. It could even be called a top-tier family, because the family had an annihilation class fighting power. In the Source world, a family that had a Demon Light elite was called a big family. Only a family that had an annihilation class elite could be called a top family. Above, there were the Saint class factions that had rule class elites. At this time, a meeting was being held in the family. The higher-ups of the Leopold family who attended the meeting all looked serious. A person with a disaster-level beast has appeared. This is not a good thing. A middle-aged man with a white face and no beard tapped his fingers rhythmically on the meeting table. His face was very serious. Within tens of thousands of miles, the strongest faction was the Leopold family. That was because the Leopold family had an annihilation class fighting power. They could be called a top-tier family, and they were proud of that. Now, a person with a disaster-level beast had appeared. It was like 2 king beasts appearing in the same area. This person's existence would seriously affect the Leopold family's position in the area. In short, before this, the Leopold family's words were absolute in this area. No family dared to defy them. Now, there were families who dared to defy them. At least, the Roulette family, which this person had joined, had the guts to do so. Not only the Roulette family, but the other families who were on good terms with this person could also rely on this person to defy their orders. This would seriously affect the Leopold family's position in the area. It's not a disaster-level beast. It's a disaster-level blood beast-controlled corpse. This person is using the corpse control ability to control the corpse of the disaster-level blood beast. An old man whose hair had not turned white corrected him. He looked very energetic. It's all the same. That disaster-level blood beast control corpse is a bramble calamity crocodile. Even if it only has the strength of its body left, it is not weaker than a normal destruction class warrior. A middle-aged man with a white face and no beard was slightly dissatisfied with being interrupted. He paused for a moment before speaking. Either way, let's end this quickly. I still have a date later. A handsome, brown-haired man said indifferently. He looked very young. In fact, he was not young anymore. The reason why he looked so young was because he had been taking precious magic potions like the face-retaining potion. It was not only women who valued their appearance very much and would not hesitate to pay a huge price for it. Some men also valued their appearance very much. This brown-haired handsome man was one of them. Can you be more serious? We are now discussing important matters related to the family's interests. You're already so old, yet you're still pretending to be young for a date. A young woman scolded him in dissatisfaction. She looked around and said, "What we should be discussing now is how to deal with Gray Fergus. Should we suppress him, or should we rope him in?" Chapter 653. I think we should suppress them. Their existence is a serious threat to the Leopold family's prestige. We must suppress them. Following the young woman's words, the people in the room whispered for a while. Then, a man who looked to be in his 50s said, "I think it's the opposite. I think we should rope them in." The handsome brown-haired man stretched out his hand and brushed a strand of brown hair in front of his forehead. Among the top families, the Leopold family situation is not good. Some families even say that the Leopold family does not deserve to be called a top family. Although this is the deliberate suppression of the other top families, we have to admit that the Leopold family's strength is at the bottom of the top families. The other party has a disaster-grade controlled corpse and can unleash annihilation-grade combat power. Plus, they are weaker than the Leopold family. They are definitely the most suitable target to rope in. A middle-aged man with a pale face frowned and said, "Although what you said is true, The other party is indeed a target worth roping in. However, this will definitely affect the Leopold family's prestige and reduce the Leopold family's ruling power in this area. If a little bit of ruling power can be exchanged for a firm ally, it is not too bad. I'm just afraid that this ally is not firm enough. Once he is roped in by other top families, he will immediately abandon us and go to another top family. Around Gray, the Leopold family's upper echelons discussed endlessly. There were roughly two opinions. One was to rope in Gray, and the other was to suppress Gray. Many people agreed with both opinions. As a result, they could not reach a consensus for a long time. "All right, quiet down." A majestic male voice sounded. As this voice sounded, the endless debate in the meeting room immediately stopped. Everyone looked at the man on the main seat. This was a man with a face that looked like he had seen the vicissitudes of life. Time was like a knife, carving scar after scar on his face, but it gave him a mature charm. "Let's wait and see for now. We will neither rope in nor suppress him. Let's observe for a while first." His eyes swept across everyone, and his voice was unquestionable. Yes, although everyone present was very confused as to why the family leader would make such a decision, they still respectfully complied. In the Leopold family, the family leader had the absolute right to speak. Since it was the family leader's decision, it was something that could not be refuted. Everyone dispersed. The man returned to his study and rang a bell. Not long after, a person of unknown gender appeared from the shadows and respectfully bowed to him. "Family leader." The man nodded slightly and then ordered, "Continue to investigate. We must find out what secrets are hidden here." The person, whose gender could not be determined, respectfully replied. Then, he emerged into the shadows and quickly disappeared. The eyes of the man with the weathered face flashed with a sharp light. According to the information sent back by the spies of the Leopold family, ever since the other party had taken over the Rahl family had been moving in the dark. He suspected that the other party or the Rahl family had some kind of secret, so he chose to wait and see. February later. It's time to take the Blood Moon potion. After sealing the training room and ordering no one to disturb him, and summoning Marina to guard the room, Gray took out a bottle of diluted Blood Moon potion. In 2 months, the remaining 4 Blood Moon grasses had been refined into Blood Moon potions. He had obtained a total of 20 Blood Moon potions, 4 were rewarded to Aubrey, and the rest were taken by Gray for his own use. As for the other members of the Leopold family, there was no need to even think about it. Aubrey had been resurrected by him, and his life and death were in his hands. He would not betray him and was worth nurturing. As for the other members of the Leopold family, they were just a group of people who had been forced to submit to him. Gray could not be at ease with them, nor could he spend a huge price to nurture them. Moreover, they had not even reached the realm of magic light. What value did they have in nurturing them? Being able to get a fixed monthly allocation of resources was already doing them justice. After uncorking the bottle, a strong medicinal fragrance assailed his nostrils. Just a whiff made Gray feel refreshed and comfortable all over. Just the smell alone had such an effect. It was obvious that the Blood Moon potion's medicinal efficacy was very strong. Afraid that the potion's efficacy would dissipate, Gray quickly swallowed it. An intense numbness immediately spread throughout his body, accompanied by a cold feeling. It was as if he had suddenly entered an air-conditioned room on a summer day. Amidst the numbness and cold, Gray could clearly feel that his physical fitness was improving at a very fast speed. Even though it had been diluted, it was still more potent than the Blood Dragon potion, rapidly promoting the improvement of his physical fitness. His muscles and bones were becoming denser, and his strength, speed, and defense were also becoming stronger. If one were to weigh him now, they would be shocked to find that his weight was continuously increasing. Although the increase was not much, and one would not even be able to notice it if they did not pay attention, it was definitely increasing. A thin piece of bone from a rule-level blood fiend weighed a few kilograms and was even denser than most metals. Obviously, as one's strength increased and the strength of one's body increased, the density of the body tissues that made up one's body would also increase. Of course, Gray's current physical strength was far from comparable to that of a rule-level blood fiend. The difference between the two was like the difference between an egg and a rock. The improvement continued for a long time before it stopped. However, although it had stopped, the numbness and cold feeling did not stop and continued to persist. Gray's body was like a sealed wine that was undergoing some kind of fermentation. The moment this fermentation was completed, there would be a huge change. Crack, crack. After a long time, Gray's body emitted a crisp sound. Then, a wave of comfort spread throughout Gray's body. Gray felt as if he had broken some kind of shackles and became extremely relaxed. However, the numbness and cold feeling did not disappear and continued to persist. After breaking the shackles, his body began to improve again. After a long period of improvement, the numbness and cold feeling slowly disappeared until they completely disappeared. Gray's improvement also came to a complete stop. I'm only one step away from magic light. Gray twisted his body, and his body emitted popping sounds. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Although he had not confirmed his current realm through cultivating the blood technique, Gray was certain that the feeling of breaking the shackles was his body's reaction to breaking through from the third to the fourth stage of the King Realm. He was now at the fourth stage of the King Realm. Above the fourth stage of the King Realm was the Magic Light Realm. Naturally, he was now only one step away from Magic Light. Sure enough, coming to the Origin World was the right choice. Gray could not help but rejoice that his decision to break through the Radiant Temple's blockade and sneak into the Origin World was clearly the correct one. If he was still in this plane, he would never have been able to reach his current realm so quickly. It was the Origin World environment and opportunities that allowed him to improve so quickly. I wonder how the three of them are doing. Gray could not help but think of Sophia, Francis, and the Gemstone Queen. He wondered where the three of them were in the Origin World right now, and what kind of experiences and opportunities they had. It's a pity that the Origin World is just too big. With his relationship with the three of them, Gray obviously did not mind helping them if he had the chance. However, the Origin World was just too big. With his current small organization, it was impossible for him to find people in the Origin World. He did not know when he would be able to reunite with the three of them again. Probably only when his name spread across the Origin World would there be a chance for them to meet again. In a luxurious private room on the second floor of a tavern in Lie City, three people sat there with ashen faces. Gray Fergus has gone too far. There were 25 bottles of Blood Moon elixir, but he didn't give us a single one. A graceful and luxurious woman in a formal dress said angrily, "That's right, 25 bottles of Blood Moon elixir. Even if he doesn't give us 10, there should be at least 5, right? He didn't even give us a single bottle." A man with triangular eyes also said furiously, "He has indeed gone too far. Although our Lie family has submitted to him, it doesn't mean that he can oppress our Lie family like lowly commoners." A fair-skinned man nodded with an ashen face. When they learned that the Patriarch was preparing to refine the Blood Moon elixir, they were excited. They felt that the opportunity to increase their strength had come. They might even be able to use the Blood Moon elixir to reach the Magic Light rank. However, in the end, they realized that they had thought too much. None of them had a share of the Blood Moon elixir. This made them extremely angry, which is why they had gathered today. The three of them subconsciously ignored the fact that the 5 Blood Moon herbs had been obtained by Gray and Aubrey from exploring the Ghost Hell. From obtaining the Blood Moon herbs to refining the Blood Moon elixir, they had not contributed at all. "We can't let this continue. If this continues, the Lie family will be finished sooner or later. We have to fight back," the fair-skinned man said resolutely. "Fight back? How we fight back? With our strength, we are no match for him. Moreover, even the Patriarch seems to be willing to become his subordinate. It's even more impossible." The graceful woman in formal attire didn't look too optimistic. "Although we're no match for him, someone else is. Don't forget who the true overlord of this region is," the fair-skinned man said meaningfully. "You mean the Leopold family?" The triangular-eyed man was delighted at first, but then he frowned. "But the Leopold family won't stand up for the Lie family." The fair-skinned man glanced at the two of them and sneered. "That's naturally the case when there are no benefits. but it's different when there are benefits. A newly discovered ghost hell should be enough to attract the Leopold family. Chapter 654. Gray, who had just finished his cultivation, was resting in the courtyard with the best scenery in the Raleigh family. He was lying on a recliner while Kinza was massaging his body to relax. The moderate pressure from his skin made him feel relaxed. The massage after training could make the originally tense muscles become relaxed, and it could help him recover from the fatigue of his body faster. Ever since he realized this, it had become an unshakable arrangement after every cultivation session. This was the forbidden area of the Raleigh family. Ever since he entered the Raleigh family, it had become a forbidden area. Only Kinza and Aubrey had the authority to enter and leave freely. The sound of footsteps quickly approached. Gray easily determined that the person was Aubrey through their mental connection. He raised his head and asked the other party, "What's the matter?" "Lord Gray, the Leopold family has come to visit." Aubrey respectfully bowed and said, "The Leopold family?" Gray signaled Kinza to stop and sat up with a trace of doubt on his face. "The Leopold family. Why are they here?" Gray naturally knew about the only first-rate family within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. He had been on guard against them for a while. After all, they were the only family in the vicinity that could threaten him. However, ever since he entered the Raleigh family, they had been indifferent to him, so he didn't pay attention to them. He didn't expect that when he had almost given up on them, they would come knocking on his door. "I'm not sure." Aubrey shook his head. He also had some doubts. The Raleigh family had never interacted with the Leopold family, and the Leopold family had never paid them a visit. He didn't know why they were here this time. "Let's go and meet this family." Gray stood up and let Kinza tidy up his clothes before walking towards the Raleigh family's VIP lounge. Although the other party was a first-rate family, Gray wouldn't be afraid because of this. With the Thorned Calamity Crocodile as his trump card, he didn't need to be too afraid even when facing a first-rate family. Entering the reception room, which was covered with a soft carpet, Gray saw 4 people. One was a middle-aged man with fair skin and no beard. One was a woman who seemed to be in her 30s or 40s. One was a man with a face full of vicissitudes, but with a rather dignified aura. It was an old man with a bald forehead. "You must be Sir Gray, right?" Seeing Gray's arrival, the 4 of them didn't stand up to show their respect for their master. They only looked at Gray, sizing him up. Among them, the man with a face full of vicissitudes was clearly sitting down, but he had a condescending attitude. He looked at Gray and asked. Gray's expression suddenly turned cold. It was obvious that they had come with ill intentions. After sitting opposite Obni, he said in a cold voice, "It is indeed me. I wonder why the 4 of you from the Leopold family are looking for me. Your Excellency Gray, allow me to introduce myself. I am the head of the Leopold family, Maxwell Leopold." The weathered man, Maxwell Leopold, exuded a powerful aura. It was nurtured from being in a high position for a long period of time. Even if they are separated by thousands of miles, the Leopold clan has heard of you. I have to say that Sir Gray has gone too far. Some things have gone too far. Gray sneered in his heart. He was even more certain that the other party had come with ill intentions. He said in a cold voice, "I wonder which matter Patriarch Maxwell is referring to?" Regarding the matter of the Raleigh family, Sir Gray has gone too far. Although the Raleigh family was in the wrong first, he didn't go so far as to exterminate the Raleigh family. Not only did he cause the Raleigh family to suffer many casualties, he even enslaved the Raleigh family. Maxwell Leopold's voice was filled with sympathy for the Raleigh family. It was as if he was fighting for justice for the Raleigh family. Didn't go so far as to exterminate them? According to Patriarch Leopold's intention, if someone assassinates you, you only need to make the other party pay some compensation. Gray's voice turned completely cold. His face was covered in frost. At the same time, he was guessing the other party's motive. The other party definitely wasn't just standing up for the Raleigh family. They definitely had other motives. They definitely weren't the type to stand up for the Raleigh family without asking for anything in return. Over the years, many families in this area had disappeared due to vendetta. The Leopold family had never stood up for these families. Now that they suddenly came to stand up for the Raleigh family, there must be some reason behind it. Had the news of the ghost domain been leaked? The only thing Gray could think of that could make the other party interested in the Raleigh family was the ghost domain that the Raleigh family had discovered. Only something like this could attract a top family like the Leopold family. The upper echelons of the Raleigh family had leaked the news. The Raleigh family had always kept the news of the ghost domain under tight lockdown. Only the upper echelons of the Raleigh family knew about it. Now that the Leopold family had suddenly come, the upper echelons of the Raleigh family must have leaked the news and attracted them. At the very least, I won't exterminate the family behind them. Maxwell Leopold looked as if he would definitely do it if it happened to him. He then looked at Aubrey and spoke with sincerity. You should be Patriarch Raleigh, right? Patriarch Raleigh, please don't worry. This time, my Leopold family will give your Raleigh family justice. If it were anyone else, with a top family backing them up, they would probably betray Gray immediately. Unfortunately, Aubrey was resurrected by Gray and would never betray Gray. Therefore, he immediately supported Gray. Thank you for your kind intentions, Patriarch Leopold. But forgive me for being blunt. This is my Raleigh family's matter and has nothing to do with the Leopold family. Please don't interfere with my Raleigh family's matters. Patriarch Raleigh, you don't have to worry about being threatened. With my Leopold family around, no one can threaten you. Aubrey didn't betray them as expected, which surprised Maxwell Leopold a little. No one wished for their family to be enslaved. Logically speaking, with the support of the Leopold family, Aubrey should have betrayed them, but he didn't. Thinking that Aubrey was afraid of Gray's power, the middle-aged man with a pale face and no beard guaranteed. That's right. With my Leopold family around, you don't have to fear him at all. The woman whose age could not be determined also said, Thank you for your kind intentions, Leopold family. But I still stand by my words. This is my Raleigh family's matter. We don't need your Leopold family's intervention. Aubrey shook his head and refused. The Raleigh family warmly welcomes the Leopold family's visit. But the Raleigh family's matters will be handled properly. There is no need for outsiders to interfere. We are helping the Raleigh family. The middle-aged man with a pale face and no beard, and the woman whose age could not be determined frowned slightly. They were furious. They did not understand why Aubrey still refused to betray them when the Leopold family had already expressed their support. No need. This is the Raleigh family's matter. You have no right to interfere. Aubrey rejected them again. No, they have the right to interfere because they were invited by the three of us. At this moment, a voice sounded. Then, three people walked in. A man with triangular eyes, a graceful middle-aged woman, and a fair-skinned man. The three of them walked into the room and stood beside the four members of the Leopold family. They then looked at Aubrey and said, The Raleigh family does not belong to you alone. Every member of the Raleigh family has a share. They were invited by the three of us to uphold justice for the Raleigh family. They have the right to interfere with any matter of the Raleigh family. The existence of the Leopold family gave the three of them great courage. The three of them, who were originally like cats when they saw Gray, looked at Gray and spoke with great courage. Gray Fergus, hand over the Blood Moon potion and the other gains from the spirit domain. These all belong to my Raleigh family. This is your goal, right? Gray did not even bother to look at the three of them. He looked at the four members of the Leopold family. Sticking up for the Luo-Lai family was just an excuse. The other party was indeed aiming for the harvest in the ghost domain. Don't misunderstand. We're only helping the Raleigh family to take back what they deserve. Maxwell Leopold's words were righteous, as if he had already become the embodiment of justice. After learning that the Raleigh family had discovered the spirit domain, obtained great gains, and refined over 20 bottles of Blood Moon potion, the Leopold family felt a rush of excitement. They immediately decided to take everything for themselves. For the sake of the gains from the spirit domain, the Leopold family did not care whether they were in the right or not. However, since they were in the right, they naturally did not mind making their actions sound reasonable. They would not allow anyone to criticize them. For this reason, they even promised that the Raleigh family would be protected by the Leopold family in the future, helping the Raleigh family to take back what they deserve. How righteous, Gray sneered disdainfully. If he really handed over these things, it was obvious who would obtain them in the end. What do you mean by shameless? I've experienced it today. However, there is one thing you are mistaken about. Gray's gaze turned sharp. A powerful aura seeped out of his body and filled the room. Others are afraid of the Leopold family, but that does not mean I am afraid of the Leopold family. The Leopold family is nothing to me. Arrogant. Don't think you can fight the Leopold family just because you have a disaster-class blood beast to control the corpse. Facing Gray's words, the pale-faced, beardless man was furious. He stood up. The woman whose age could not be determined also raised her eyebrows. She looked unfriendly. Ever since the Leopold family had become a top family, it had been a long time since anyone dared to look down on the Leopold family. Whether or not I can fight you, we will know after we try. Gray looked at the 4 members of the Leopold family. He was looking at the bald, old man who had not made a sound. You must be the Annihilation class elite of the Leopold family, right? Chapter 655. Young man, you are too arrogant. Being stared at by Gray, the old man raised his head. He had a very ordinary face, like an ordinary old man. The only difference was that his eyes were very sharp. He looked at Gray, and a strong pressure came out of his body. It was like a giant mountain was pressing down on Gray. The arrogant one is the Leopold family. You use your status as a top family to bully others. Do you really think everyone is afraid of you? Gray's eyes met the old man's. A faint purple light enveloped his entire body. Through the decaying power of time, he blocked the old man's mountain-like pressure. The reason he knew who the old man was because when he said, "The Leopold family is nothing," the old man released a scary pressure. It was this scary pressure that allowed him to confirm the old man's identity. I don't care how the Leopold family bullies other families, but you don't have what it takes to bully me. Be startled. Do you know who you were talking to? Seeing Gray talking to the bald old man so arrogantly, the middle-aged man scolded him angrily. Do you know who you were talking to? Gray looked at the middle-aged man coldly. The coldness in his eyes was like ice, freezing the middle-aged man. You, don't be so arrogant, being stared at by Gray. The middle-aged man felt a chill in his heart. He could not help but look away. He then remembered that the young man was not only powerful, but he also controlled a disaster-level blood beast. He was much stronger than he was. Although he had the magic light realm, in terms of combat power, he was no match for the young man. If the young man used the disaster-level blood beast, he would be killed in one hit. Young man, do you really think that just because you have some power, no one can do anything to you? Seeing that his own family had been intimidated by Gray, the balding old man snorted coldly. His voice was cold, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop abruptly, dropping to negative tens of degrees in an instant. At least the Leopold family does not have the power to do so. Gray coldly looked at the old man. Even though he was facing the eyes of an Annihilation class elite, he did not look away. Good, very good. This old man will let you see if the Leopold family has the ability to do so. The balding old man was so angry that he laughed. The coldness in his eyes was so condensed that it seemed to have materialized, stabbing towards Gray like a sharp blade. In the next moment, his figure stood up from his seat like a ghost and quickly pounced towards Gray. Whoosh! Moving at a speed far beyond the speed of sound, he stirred up a gust of wind in the reception room. Under this gust of wind, various tables, chairs, and expensive decorations in the reception room were swept up. In an instant, the old man's figure approached Gray. The skinny hand was like an iron claw as it grabbed at Gray's throat, intending to lift Gray up like a little chick. Ding! His grab missed. Just as his hand was about to grab Gray, Gray's body suddenly shot up. In an instant, he shot up 30 feet and dodged the attack. The balding old man's hand hit a giant creature. It was blocked by the giant creature's black, keratinized skin. At the critical moment, Gray summoned the Thorn Disaster Crocodile to dodge the old man's attack. After learning that the Leopold family had come to visit, he felt that something was not right. So, before he went to see the Leopold family, he had already changed the corpse control to the Thorn Disaster Crocodile. Of course, even if the corpse control had been changed to the Thorn Disaster Crocodile, when the old man attacked, under normal circumstances, he would not have been able to react in time. He would not have been able to summon the Thorn Disaster Crocodile from the purple ring. However, under the acceleration of the time rule power, not only did his movement speed increase, but it also increased his reaction speed. That allowed him to summon the Thorn Disaster Crocodile from the purple ring before the old man attacked him. The house is going to collapse. The Thorn Disaster Crocodile's body was 40 feet long. It was not something the living room could hold. The Thorn Disaster Crocodile's head pierced through the roof. The entire house collapsed, turning into a pile of rubble. Aside from Gray and the bald old man, the weakest person in the room was a king class. They were not injured, but they were covered in dust. They looked a bit worse for wear. You want to see if I have what it takes? Standing atop the Thorn Disaster Crocodile, Gray looked at the balding old man. Then I will show you if I have what it takes. Come with me. Under Gray's guidance, the Thorn Disaster Crocodile walked out of the Raleigh family's home. It followed the city's most spacious street and walked out of the city. Along the way, many buildings were knocked down by the Thorn Disaster Crocodile's giant body. Even on the spacious street, it was inevitable that some buildings would collapse. But this was the best outcome. It was at least 1,000 times better than fighting in the city. If two annihilation classes fought in the city, it would be lucky if half of the people in the city survived. The old man coldly grunted and followed. He did not care about the lives of the Luo Lai family and the millions of people in Luo Lai City. However, the Leopold family had come this time in the name of standing up for the Luo Lai family. They naturally could not ignore the lives of the Luo Lai family and the millions of people in Luo Lai City. The two of them left the city one after the other. They were a few dozen miles away from the city when they finally stopped in the middle of a barren land. Many people followed them. There were people from the Raleigh family and the Leopold family. There were also spies from the smaller families and other families in the city. However, these people were hiding far away, watching from a few miles away. They were prepared to distance themselves at any time. Most of them had never seen a destructive battle before, but they had heard of it. Naturally, they didn't dare to get too close. They looked at each other. It did not matter if it was Gray or the bald old man. Both of them were murderous. They knew this fight was unavoidable. The benefits of the Spirit Zone were too great. That was especially true of the 20 bottles of Blood Moon Potion. The Leopold family was very excited about it. If the Leopold family took it, the Neil Potter family might have been able to level up. They might have been able to create a second Annihilation class elite. So, the Leopold family had to take it. Gray was not going to give up his practice resources. If he used the resources he had obtained from the Spirit Zone well, it would have been enough to help him reach Annihilation class. He would not give it up. Therefore, this battle was absolutely unavoidable. So, he stomped on the ground, causing it to cave in. The bald old man shot out like a streak of light, so fast that the distant spectators could only see an afterimage. He erupted with full speed as he charged towards Gray and the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. Dong, 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 dong. Under Gray's control, the Thorn Disaster Crocodile moved its giant legs. With each step, it traveled a few dozen meters toward the bald old man. The ground shook as it ran. Even the people who were watching from several miles away could feel the obvious shock, and a faint look of shock appeared on their faces. Before the fight had even begun, there was already a lot of movement. After the fight, how big would it be? With the speed of the Thorn Disaster Crocodile and the bald old man, the distance between them was a few hundred meters. They closed the gap in an instant. Boom! Under Gray's control, the Thorn Disaster Crocodile's giant claws, which were the size of a room, were raised. They tore through the air and created a strong wind. They were headed toward the bald old man. Before the claws hit the ground was already marked by a fierce claw mark. The cracks were spreading. That was Annihilation class attack. Although it could not use its Blood Beast powers, the Thorn Disaster Crocodile's power was enough to reach Annihilation class. At the same time that the Thorn Disaster Crocodile attacked the bald old man, the bald old man's face turned serious. He also launched his own attack. Surprisingly, he did not have any weapons in his hands. It was as if he was going to fight the Thorn Disaster Crocodile with his bare hands. Whoosh! But soon, a shocking scene appeared. He stretched out his right hand, and then the flesh and bones of his right hand started to wriggle and extend, becoming longer and longer, bigger and bigger, and finally becoming several meters long. Then, the shape of the flesh and bones that were a few meters long quickly changed. The color also changed from light brown to black. Finally, the old man's right hand turned into a giant black blade that was a few meters long. Weapon transformation ability. Someone exclaimed from the spectators in the distance. Weapon transformation was one of the physical abilities. It was also one of the most powerful physical abilities. This ability could change the texture of one's flesh and bones. It could turn one's flesh and bones into weapons. The weapons created with this ability were far more powerful than ordinary magic weapons. Moreover, they would increase with the increase of one's level. With this ability, it could be said that one had a magic weapon that was constantly growing. Weapon transformation? You're ignorant. Watch carefully. Hearing some people's cries of surprise, the other three members of the Leopold clan had proud expressions on their faces. How could the Leopold clan's blood arts be as simple as turning one's physical body into a weapon? If that was the case, how could the Leopold clan become a top clan? Every top-tier clan was not simple. They all had the power to crush other clans. Most importantly, almost every top-tier clan had a powerful blood technique. The bald old man's right arm that had turned into a giant black blade did not stop changing. Many crimson lines appeared on his right arm. It was as if they were naturally formed rune lines. Then, in the next moment, crimson flames suddenly burned on the giant black blade. The giant blade turned from its original black color to its current black interior and crimson exterior. A terrifying temperature spread. This was a giant flaming blade. It was not a simple weapon transformation. Chapter 656. On top of the base of weaponization, he has a fire power. This is a mixed power. Many people were shocked. They looked at the red flame around the giant blade. The Leopold family's annihilation class elite had mixed powers. Mixed powers were a synonym for power. Not only was he invincible, but he could also fight those of a higher level. He was already in annihilation class. If he used mixed powers, how strong would he be? Pang! The burning red flame, giant blade, and the giant claw that was the size of a room collided. The giant blade's power was enhanced by fire. It was used on the giant claw. The giant claw's scary power was used on the red flame, giant blade. Dong! 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 The bald old man did not move at all, but the area around him was full of cracks. The thorny calamity crocodile's huge body, which weighed more than 100 tons, was pushed back again and again, leaving messy footprints of different depths on the ground. The bramble disaster crocodile is at a disadvantage. Seeing this, many people looked as if they had expected it. The bramble disaster crocodile's power was like an annihilation class elite, but it was not facing an ordinary annihilation class elite. It was annihilation class elite with mixed powers. It was normal for it to be at a disadvantage. Grey Fergus is no match for the Leopold family's annihilation class elite. The main culprits of this conflict were the noblewoman, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man. They were very excited. With the Leopold family's annihilation class elite, Grey Fergus was going to die. The Raleigh family would be able to escape Grey Fergus's control. When the time came, they would be the heroes who had helped the Raleigh family escape Grey Fergus's control. The three of them would be worshipped by the Raleigh family and become the new leaders of the Raleigh family. As for the leader, Aubrey, who was a strong supporter of Grey Fergus, he would be a sinner of the Raleigh family. He would be despised by the Raleigh family. Does he really think that he can contend against the Leopold family just because he has a disaster-level blood beast to control corpses? Not to mention that he can't use the abilities of the blood beast when he was alive. Even if he could use the abilities of the blood beast when he was alive, he would definitely not be a match for Lord Fod. Contempt appeared in the eyes of the three men from the Leopold family. The prestige of a top family was not to be challenged. Trying to challenge the Leopold family with just a disaster-level blood beast was no different from seeking death. If he had been tactful and handed over all the things he had obtained from the Ghost Domain, the Leopold family might have spared his life on account of the other party's understanding of the situation. As for now, There was no longer any possibility of survival. The provocation that the Leopold family received had to be washed away with blood. The Leopold family really does possess a hybrid ability. The Bramble Calamity crocodile retreated quite a distance before stabilizing itself. Standing on the Bramble Calamity crocodile's back, Gray stared at the balding old man. The Leopold family was a top-tier family. Generally speaking, top-tier families had powerful blood arts. Therefore, he was not surprised that the slightly bald old man had a mixed blood art. Although I've seen an introduction to the armament transformation ability in the Raleigh family's library, this is the first time I've seen it. The only thing that surprised Gray was that one of the basic abilities of the other party was the armament transformation ability. This was a rather rare physical ability. Gray had only seen records of it in the Raleigh family's library. This was the first time he had seen it with his own eyes. Whoosh! Gaining the upper hand with one strike, the slightly bald old man Fod stomped on the ground, sending dirt and gravel flying. His body was like a cannonball, lunging forward with a several-meter-long giant blade that was 2 to 3 times his height. Bang! The Bramble Calamity crocodile raised its giant claw to meet the attack, colliding with the giant red blade once more. However, it was pushed back by the terrifying impact. At this moment, Fod quickly caught up, leaping to the same height as the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head, and swung his giant blade at the crocodile's head. He was very clear about the weakness of corpse control abilities. Even if he wasn't, he would have investigated thoroughly before coming to the Raleigh family. Therefore, his attack was aimed at the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head. However, just as his attack was about to hit the Bramble Calamity crocodile, a layer of silver gray suddenly appeared on the surface of the crocodile's body. Clang! The giant blade struck the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. The Bramble Calamity crocodile retreated slightly and dissipated the power of this ferocious strike. As for the part of its head that was struck, it was undamaged. There wasn't even a trace of scar. What a strong defense. No, the Bramble Calamity crocodile's defense can't be this strong. A silver-gray color. This is some kind of metallization ability. Fod, who had landed on the ground, was shocked. Just the impact of his landing had caused countless cracks to appear on the ground. He originally thought that even if this strike couldn't split the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head open, it would at least leave a serious wound on its head. He didn't expect that his attack wouldn't even leave a scratch on the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head. Although the hybrid ability is indeed very strong, it's impossible to break the Bramble Calamity crocodile's defense with this level of power. On the Bramble Calamity crocodile's back, Gray's expression was calm. He wasn't surprised that the Bramble Calamity crocodile's head could withstand Fod's attack unscathed. The Bramble Calamity crocodile was a disaster-grade blood beast that specialized in defense. After using the alloy form ability, its defense increased even more. Although he didn't know how strong it was definitely terrifying. This level of defense wasn't something that could be broken by the opponent's combat strength. This was also one of the reasons why he dared to challenge the Leopold family. Even if he guessed that the Leopold family might have mastered the hybrid blood technique, he still dared to fight them. The strong defense of the alloy form was one of the main reasons why he dared to rely on it. Even with the hybrid ability, it's difficult to break the defense. Then, there's only, as an Annihilation class elite, Fod had a lot of combat experience. After realizing that his combat strength couldn't break the defense, he knew what he had to do. So, his body quickly rushed toward the Bramble Calamity crocodile, but just as he was about to reach it, he suddenly turned and swept to the side of the Bramble Calamity crocodile. He stepped in the air, and a giant blade wrapped in red flames slashed toward Gray, who was on the Bramble Calamity crocodile's back. The Bramble Calamity crocodile's defense was very strong. Even he couldn't do anything about it, but Gray Fergus was the Bramble Calamity crocodile's weakness. If he killed Gray Fergus, the Bramble Calamity crocodile's ability to control corpses would naturally lose its ability to move. Of course, Gray Fergus knew this weakness very well and would definitely protect it. This was why he hadn't aimed at Gray Fergus from the beginning. Schwa! The giant blade, wrapped in red flames, slashed down. Before the terrifying heat even got close, it made people feel like they were in a sauna. Gray's expression froze. He was the Bramble Calamity crocodile's weakness, and he knew this very well. Although controlling the Bramble Calamity crocodile didn't require him to be too close, and he could control it even from a few miles away, he couldn't leave the Bramble Calamity crocodile and let it fight Fod alone. Fod wasn't a blood beast with limited intelligence. He knew that he was the Bramble Calamity crocodile's weakness. If he discovered that he had left the Bramble Calamity crocodile, Gray Fergus would definitely find a way to shake off the Bramble Calamity crocodile and attack him. This would be more dangerous than fighting alongside the Bramble Calamity crocodile. So, under Gray's control, the Bramble Calamity crocodile's giant body suddenly moved to the side, dodging the slash coming at Gray. Then, it slashed at Fod from the other side with its giant claw. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the giant bottomless cracks spread out in all directions. Before the giant claw slammed down, Fod dodged it and once again swept to the side of the Bramble Calamity crocodile. The giant blade once again slashed at Gray, who was on the Bramble Calamity crocodile's back. Shio! At this time, a giant tail full of thorns suddenly whipped toward him. He had no choice but to raise his giant blade to block the giant tail. Dong! He blocked the giant tail, but using this opportunity, the Bramble Calamity crocodile adjusted its posture again. It protected Gray behind it and slashed at him with its claw. Dong! 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 The Bramble Calamity crocodile and Fod clashed again and again. There were thunderous noises. The Bramble Calamity crocodile was forced to retreat, but used its powerful defense to block the attacks and protect Gray. Something is not right. Among the people watching from a few miles away, the three people from the Leopold family were the first to realize that something was wrong. As members of a top-class family, they knew more about the Annihilation class than anyone else present. They thought the fight would be easy, but it had turned into a stalemate. Although the Bramble Calamity crocodile was clearly at a disadvantage, it was able to block the Elder's attacks again and again. Why hasn't he killed Gray Fergus yet? The noblewoman, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man looked anxious. The reason they had gone to the Leopold family was because they thought the Leopold family had the power to kill Gray Fergus. Now, although Gray Fergus was at a disadvantage, he did not look like he was going to be killed. That made them anxious. After all, if Gray Fergus did not die and escaped, the three of them would be in trouble. Gray Fergus would definitely seek revenge on the three of them, and the Leopold family would not be able to protect them all the time. If they were targeted by someone with Annihilation class combat power, there was only death waiting for them. There was no other possibility. You really think you can defeat Mr. Gray by asking the Leopold family for help? Looking at the three of them, Aubrey looked at them with disdain. Out of everyone there, he was the one who knew Gray the best. Although he did not know everything about Gray, he knew a little. He was not surprised by the situation. Aubrey, what are you trying to do? Seeing Aubrey look at them coldly, the noblewoman, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man moved closer to the Leopold family. Do not worry. I will not attack the three of you right now. Mr. Gray will decide how to deal with you three. Aubrey coldly laughed and looked away. He used his actions to show his attitude.